Hello, everybody. Welcome to the latest episode of Dungeons & Developer Insights. Today, I'm joined by Dungeons & Dragons Online's newest producer, Tolero, who is new to the producing role, but not new to Dungeons & Dragons. Been around for quite a long time. So welcome.
Hello. Glad to be here.
Yeah, how are you doing today?
Doing pretty good. Yeah, it's a nice evening. I had to tell my static group, I was like, sorry, I got somewhere to be tonight.
Yeah, I got this thing to do, so we'll play later.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you've been around in a while. You've done a lot of Dungeons & Dragons Online. So what's your connection? Like, so where did you come from? How'd you get into Dungeons & Dragons Online? How did this whole thing come about?
So way back when the game was launching, circa 2006, they had a program called the Invite a Friend program, essentially, where you could. This was back when it was subscription. You could give a 10-day pass to your friends to let them in, right?
I remember this. Yeah, that was awesome.
And I was at a friend's house, and this buddy of mine said, "Hey, I know you really like tabletop D&D, and I know that you used to play EverQuest, and there's real irony in this now, considering that now I'm part of the Daybreak family, and they have EverQuest." But
yeah.
So he's like, "I know you used to play EverQuest, and I know that you kind of gave up on MMOs, but I know you like MMO, and I know you like tabletop, and I just found this game, and I think you're going to like it." Yeah. So he gives me the 10-day trial, and at first I was like, "No, I'm done with MMOs. I'm not going to do this." Well, then, we're at the party, and, the night goes on, and at some point I found myself to be the first person awake the next day. Right. And I was like, fine, I'm going to try this game. Whatever. I have nothing else to do. You're in somebody else's house, and you're like, I've got nothing else to do, so try
Of course.
This. And so I started playing it, and just right away I was like, oh, it's all the 3-5 rules. Oh, I totally know how to build a character in this, and I know what each of these abilities is doing. And I was like, okay, fair. You thought I might like this. So far, so good. And then I got into the game, and, like I was talking about in my letter, you walk in a room in the old school tutorial, and you see all this broken stuff all over the floor, and I was just going to kind of walk right up to it, right?
Yeah.
And the Dungeon Master pops on, and he's like, oh, watch out, there's broken splinters on the floor. And I'm like, oh, should I watch out? Yeah. And I just found that really kind of charming, this like voice that was sort of following you around, and it wasn't you, and it wasn't your internal monologue, but they're not there either, and it's all kind of strangely fourth wall yet not, and just the whole thing, I was just like, wow, I love this. I love everything about this. And I was a big Eberron fan too, so the fact that it was set in Eberron was huge for me. But surprisingly, I had no games industry background prior to that.
Okay.
I was actually coming from the credit bureau. So when you would apply for a mortgage, and your mortgage company would be like, I don't know about this score, we need to see if we can get your score up, I'd be the person they'd be calling, because I'd be the one doing the data validations.
Right.
So I started playing DDO in my spare time, while still having my day job. And I just
remember
really
your first character
liked
that you played?
Yeah. So it's kind of funny, because technically the very first character I played was the one on that 10-day trial.
Yeah.
And she was just a little rogue, just like a straight class rogue. And the 10 days kind of went past. And then I was still thinking, like, do I want to get into this? I think I really liked this game. Yeah, I think I want to do it. Well, by that point, the 10 days had passed because we were out of town.
Mm-hmm.
So when I went to go and sign up, you couldn't actually get the account, because if the 10 days passed, it locked you out, because it was to try to put a sense of urgency to say, oh, you better sign up.
Yeah, you got to sign up.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, sign up if you want to keep these characters you made. And then ironically, I still have that character, because after we went free to play and all the subs opened, it included those old free trial accounts too.
Oh,
and so I was able to get back into that account. Yeah. But so my first real character that I made, that I was playing all the time, was just a little bard. He was a bard, and I think at the time he may have even had just one level of fighter, because I used to love multi-classing a lot, and I don't even know what I was doing with that build to put a level fighter in it at the time.
Early DDO was like, oh, take a level of this, take a level of that all the time. Yeah.
So I had two characters that I was playing. I was playing my bard, and then my backup character was a fighter pally.
Yeah.
And so my spouse was playing with me. He was playing a cleric. He loved playing clerics. And so as I was playing, I got to the point where I was really liking the game, and I'm kind of a social butterfly too, right? And I was like, I kind of like the fact that they have this role-playing server. I enjoy role-playing with people, and I was like, I bet if I started doing interesting contests and sort of community building things, that it would be something that helped kind of attach people when they were waiting between releases. Because we would get to cycles where it felt like content was just too far away,
Yeah.
It was back when level cap was 10 and stuff, and then maybe we hit 12 by that point. So I was like, if I have other things to do with people, that way they'll still stick around until the next content release comes. Because for me, it was all about, I really liked this game, and I knew that the only way that the game was going to keep going is if it had people. So I was doing whatever I could do to keep people in the game, and even if they just wanted to show up for the spectacle of these weird like trivia contests and fashion shows and stuff, that it was like spectacle to keep people in.
I think pretty much everybody's probably had that experience where you're playing an MMO and then people just lose some interest, and then half your friends start playing another game, and you're like, but this game. Yeah,
exactly. So I started really ramping that up. I was making new friends, and we were doing lots of fun, interesting stuff, and it started to become almost like a second job at that point. Just the amount of extracurricular time I was dumping into it. Right, we were making videos. 'Cause you kids today with your like first-person view camera. Back in the day, I didn't even have any of that. Right, I would have to try to be like ducking down in the frame with emotes and stuff. You didn't have live streams, right? Everything you were doing is you were lucky if you could put it up on YouTube and get people to go check it out.
Yep.
So just all this extra time, doing this, spending time doing the contests, engaging with people, a lot of time in the forums, doing write-ups, doing roleplay write-ups. After a while, one night, I had friends over. We used to have LAN parties and stuff back in the day, right? Back when that was a thing, when you would actually like take your whole tower to your
and just go over to someone's
party,
house,
right? Yeah. You would like literally be lunking around like a giant desktop cube before everybody was on laptops. And they noticed that they would be playing, and they're like, "Hey man, why don't you come and play?" And I'd be like, "Oh, sorry, I can't. I got this thing that I'm doing in my game." And so one night, the same buddy that had been like, "Hey, I think you'd like this game," he comes up to me, he's watching for a little bit, and he goes, "They pay people to do that, right?" I'm like, "What? What do you mean?" Like, "Oh yeah, these game companies, they'll totally pay for people to go and like do community building just like what you're doing." He's like, "In fact, if we go on their website right now, they might even have a job for it." And surely enough, they did, just by sheer coincidence. So I was like, "Man, could I do that?" Right? I don't even come from the games industry. Is that gonna matter to them? So I just tried. And what I found was what was really valuable was having deep product knowledge, having an engagement with the players. One of the big things that really attracted them at the time was the fact that I had done this huge, I don't even know how to describe it, study. Let's call it a study.
Okay.
This huge write-up on the way that the servers were behaving. Like I wanted to show that, was there really a difference between the server populations? Because back then, character transfers weren't as easy to do. So I'm like, is there a different culture on each of the servers? Because I had a home server, right? I was playing with Alanis all the time. I never really bothered to play on the other ones much. So I was like, am I just used to the DDO that exists on this server? What's it like if you're playing on like Argo or if you're on Zoriat? We had different server names at the time, but so I just did this, spent like a month just studying people. What were people's guild names like? What kinds of chat was happening in the general chat? What were people's character names like? Just all the different weird little patterns that I could find, and then I just aggregated it all together and did a write-up. Like, here's what I found about each of them. Well, that apparently was sort of the tipping point for them. Like, they appreciated the fact that I had been doing the community
everything else,
events and stuff, but then they were like, "Oh, this is can you come do that for us?" Like, we're actually looking for people that have a vested interest in like really understanding what players are up to and doing it in an analytical way. And so ironically, I was brought in not for Dungeons and Dragons Online. I was hired in to be a community rep on Lord of the Rings Online originally.
Oh, interesting. That's a cool way to get your start. I find I've heard the story of many people where they get their start with Lord of the Rings and they slowly creep their way onto the DDO team.
Yeah. I even in my interview back then, I was like, "Hey, I know you're bringing me in for Lord of the Rings, but is it ever possible to go across to the other game?" And back 2006, 7, they were like, "No, that never happens. Usually people come in on one game and that's where they stay." And over the years, that's proven to not be as true. But yeah, I've been there ever since. So I started in community, just doing community moderation, helping out the other community managers. I was doing originally for Lotro, but what they found was I just had so much DDO product and community knowledge that they're like, it's just silly to not have you also help over here too. And then as I was doing that, an opportunity came up where they actually didn't have, they had an opening for a community manager, a more senior role. And they're like, "You know what? We know we've had you on Lord of the Rings, but we really think that we would like you on DDO like full time." I'm like, "Okay, okay, I would like that too.
You're like, yeah, sure.
Sure.
I've been thinking about that maybe a little.
Maybe a little, maybe a little. So, and so then for many years, I worked in community. That's the main place that a lot of people on the DDO side of the fence would know me from.
Yep.
Over time, eventually, I want to say 2014 maybe. At one point, one of the VPs in the marketing group came to me because I'm just doing my community thing. I used to love to do like puzzles and all kinds of fun stuff in the websites. I remember one time with Tarrant, we had a thing where we made a multi-layer puzzle. One of the steps involved us taking raw bacon and like laying it on the table in these different shapes and then taking pictures, and like you had to put the pictures together in a certain order to spell something. And at the time we were laying the bacon, I'm like, man, is this our real job?
Yeah, right?
But it was just such a blast, right? And so to me, I'm just happily doing the community thing, right?
Mm-hmm.
And one day the VP of marketing comes to me and says, I want you to take over commerce for DDO. And I'm like, really? I don't have, I'm not like an economist or anything. Like,
it's a bit of a step in a different direction.
Right? And so what he said was that every time the commerce group was trying to come up with new things to bring to the game, inevitably they'd always have to consult me about, well, do you think players would like it if it was this way? Well, do you think this is too much? Or, well, what if we did it this way? No, that's not going to work. That's going to make them really angry. Okay, well, so we'd always have these back and forths, right?
Mm-hmm.
And just watching this over time, he's like, I know you don't have formal training in it, but you definitely have the skill set, even though you don't
the practical
have
training. You did it.
right. And not even just like, oh, what would players like, but even things like value propositions, right? Having a good value proposition is huge for coming up with good items for the game. Like
Absolutely.
If you put out an item and there was one MMO, I can't remember the name because, I hate to like throw another game under the bus. They had some item that they came out with and they attached a price tag to it that was just ridiculous. And their community just blew up, right? And so some of the commerce friends I was talking to about it after it happened, they're like, I can't believe that happened. I was like, well, I can. Like, I don't care if you think that nobody would buy it and you put a price tag on it that's ridiculous. And what they thought was going to happen was just, oh, if the price is wrong, we'll just change it. And they didn't realize that people would actually be like mad about the price. And it's like, there's a tipping point. There's a threshold where if the price is too much, like people feel insulted by that. Yep. And like in this instance, this isn't just like standard retail where you put out like a shirt on the rack and the customer looks at it and either likes it or they don't. Imagine if every time you went to the store, every person in the store was talking to each other actively about the merchandise. Like, hello, perfect stranger that I've never met before. What do you think of the fact that this necklace is blah, 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 blah? Like, that's not a thing that happens in other types of sales experiences.
Yep.
So those are the elements that they decided I would be a good fit for commerce. So I did commerce for a while, right? And then eventually that sort of glommed onto brand, a similar situation where they're like, look, if we're always having to consult you on, look and feel type stuff to sand check whether something is off the mark, it would make sense for you to take that on as well. And so I've basically been in and out of doing lots of different businessy, behind-the-scenesy things. Over time, it sort of meant that I didn't get to like actively chat with players as much as I used to, and that part was like I'm sad about that part of it because I'd be watching you from the distance, like I see you.
Yeah, because I remember seeing your posts all over the forums all the time, and then at some point there's just like Tolero posts disappear, right? And they're gone.
Yeah. And like once in a blue moon, we'd have some situation where it was like, well, it makes sense for Tolero to be the one to post about this. I'm like, yeah, it's good because then they'll know I'm still around, right?
Yeah, whenever there's some e-store stuff going on.
Yeah, exactly. There were certain situations it was like, okay, well, she must still be there because she just posted about an e-store thing. And so in the last couple years, once we became SSG, a lot of that work became really behind the scenes. When you take the little company that was started as, and then that got absorbed by Warner Brothers, and then we spun off, right? That whole, hey, we're part of Warner Brothers thing. Imagine taking something enterprise-sized and trying to stuff it down to startup size.
Yep, exactly.
Right? So there's so much work it takes to go through all the different chunks of the infrastructure that touch, in my case, things like the website or the stores or just... Maybe there's a thing that we used to do on our own, but now since we're part of another company, they have a piece of tech that would let us link to theirs and it would be more efficient. easier to maintain or have better staff to support it.
Yeah.
And then you have to go through the big integration project to make that happen.
Yep.
So that is a lot of where I've been. It's been like, 2 or 3 degrees removed from gameplay related stuff. Because it just takes time to get those projects done. You're coordinating with many, 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 many different teams and different types of roles too. You're talking to engineers, You're talking to project managers, you're talking to the business group, you're talking to people that are running the contracts and the, like name a department and I've had to talk to it, right, or engage with it actively. And that's kind of how I landed where I landed now. The stars aligned. And one day, as I'm sort of heads down doing my thing, and I'm like, okay, it looks like we've got so much work to do that we think we're going to go ahead. It's too much for Sev to handle on his own. We're going to go ahead and open up this producer role. And then I was like, wait a minute. I don't even know why I paused my brain cycles long enough to think about this. Wait a minute. Why couldn't I do that?
Yeah.
Right?
Doing all these other pieces, just kind of put it together. Yeah.
Yeah. And I had a brief stint of production work over on Batman Arkham Underworld for a couple of months. I really enjoyed that. And at the time, we basically had shuffled me across to do that for a little bit, and then I shuffled back. And it was sort of a toe in the water experience. Like, do I like production? Because it's different kind of work than working on commerce.
Yep.
And as I was thinking, I was like, wait a minute. I actually did really like that. I liked helping developers be able to go you're sort of removing roadblocks for them to be able to make and do creativity faster.
Right. Exactly.
You're optimizing processes. You're negotiating priorities. Like, let's say there's a thing that they think is really important. They have to have somebody to help them lobby against some of the other priorities that other departments might have.
Yeah.
So just lots of things like that. And I was like, man, you know what? I bet I would be really happy being a producer on DDO. Like, I've missed engaging with the players. I love engaging with that team.
Yeah.
There's so much about it. I was like, you know what? This is where I want to be. This is home.
Yeah. Spent too many years just, behind the scenes doing important work, but it's just not maybe the work where you saw yourself your entire life,
It's a different kind of work, and I enjoyed it. Like, I'm very analytical. I'm super nerdy, and so it wasn't like I didn't enjoy it. It was more just like this weird window of opportunity. I was like, you know what? Why don't I just go for it? It's not that I dislike the work that I'm doing. I just feel like I would be really beneficial in that role too.
Yeah.
So I just went for it.
When it comes to producer, I think a lot of people probably don't entirely know what a producer for DDO even does, or what you do. So what do you do now that you're a producer of DDO? What does that mean for the players who don't understand what that means?
We've always tried to think of a good way to describe it, right? There's a couple different roles in the industry that just, if you're not in the industry, you're like, what the heck is that even doing? And producer is definitely one of those roles. Yep. So the product manager, it was easy for people to kind of get that that's the money Eastern person, right? What the producer is if you think about like a movie director, they're kind of like a movie director a little bit. We're someone who is very focused on priorities of what the team is working on.
Right.
So if we have many, many different ideas that we want to do, and trust me, we always do, they're assessing which thing is the best thing to do in the time windows we have available. They're also looking at what direction longer term is the game going to go? Like, what do we want to try to accomplish with the game further out? They're also assessing things like the health of the business. They're working in collaboration with somebody like my old role to talk about, okay, here's what revenue is doing. Here's what the player populations are doing. Doesn't seem like this thing is doing what we want. What if we try something else? Do you guys got any other ideas back there we can pull out that'll address this hole here? Or it can be things like what we're dealing with right now, where, okay, we have lots of things we're wanting to make, right? We always have to put stuff out for people, because if you don't keep your game fresh with new content, people can wander away.
Yeah,
but sometimes, right? But sometimes you have to look and go, hey, we need to pause here, because I think we're reaching a point where we really need to just stop and focus on fill in the blank. And in this case, it's performance right now.
Yeah.
The producer is somebody who, because we have that sort of 10,000-foot view, whereas many of the other departments, the quest designers on the content team, they're very focused on, okay, what stories can we tell? And the systems designers are focused on, okay, which game systems do we want to do? What's the long-term effect of this game system or that loot system, or etc. The producer is looking much further back and sort of multidisciplinary to say, what's going on with DDO as a whole entity, and what needs to change to make sure that that entity stays healthy and that the customers that are coming to the entity are happy and engaged. Because it's much harder for all those folks down in the individual disciplines to sort of keep that big picture in mind. Because it takes work. It takes a lot of
Absolutely,
work
yeah.
to keep on top of the data that lets you know what's going on, to interface with like the engineers, to interface with the marketing group, to like all these different teams. If each member of the DDO design team or the content team was the one trying to track all that stuff, they'd never actually get to build any dungeons or make any loot or anything else. So that's a high level of what a producer's about.
Okay. So since you kind of get like the ability to see what everyone's working on and, you know, how they're working on each of the individual projects and tasks, and you've also been around with DDO for a long time, I want to know from your perspective as somebody who stepped into this role, what do you think are some of the kind of the strengths of Dungeons & Dragons Online? What kind of separates it from like other MMOs in its field?
Sure. Definitely character build customization. Just like the fact that I have like 4 fighters and they all play differently, like that's just not a thing you get in other games. And it just means that you're always in a place where you can be experimenting as a player. Like, yeah, sure, there's sort of the meta cycle of certain builds will be hot for a while. But at the end of the day, every player always has the ability to say, what if I tried this? And that's what I love, right? You don't have a situation where everything is a little more boxed in and you're like, well, if I'm playing a cleric, this is kind of the way you got to play a cleric. Instead, you can make these experiments and feel really proud of your experiments if they work out, right? I used to know people to do all kinds of weird things. Like, I'm going to make a barbarian coal thrower. That's all they're going to do is throw coal.
No.
And so
you're just a barbarian coal thrower.
Right? And that's just what they wanted to do. And they wanted to see if they could pull it off. And what would it be like? And so that is a thing that DDO just excels at. Like, you can just make so many different imaginative combinations of character abilities in a way that I just don't find in a lot of other games. The other thing is the fact that it's not linear. Some games you sort of follow a linear story track, and this can be a vulnerability too because people can get choice paralysis. But in a lot of things, it's like you're sort of following a linear path, and when that path runs out, you're sort of stuck there, kind of waiting for the path to extend, and you're just always
finish the expansion. You're waiting for something next to happen.
Now you're waiting. But with ours, and also it meant that you have to play all the story when it's linear like that. Like, maybe you don't like this part of the story. Well, too bad. You gotta slog through it. Or maybe you'll cross your fingers and hope that there's like a level skip thing that'll let you get around it. With ours, the D&D IP just lends itself to having different modules. And so that if you never want to go to the Necropolis, you never have to, right? You don't want to go to Forgotten Realms. In theory, you could just spend all your time in Eberron, or wanting us to be at a point where it could be vice versa. You could spend all your time in Forgotten Realms and never touch Eberron if you didn't want to. But that's a thing that also doesn't come up in a lot of games, this sort of a la carte, choose what parts of the story. And the stories are sort of self-contained, right? Like, we do have threads that run across multiple packs, so you can follow the truthful one pretty far along. But a lot of the stories is you get these nice digestible story arcs where you get through the story and at the end you're like, cool, I know what was up with that story. It's all self-contained. And I really enjoy that because I don't know about you. So for some people, it's kind of like, I don't know if you watch a lot of anime. There's some animes where it's like season after season after season after season. And I don't have the appetite for that. Sometimes I just want my one season story.
It's funny. From my perspective, I hear it from both people. I actually love the fact that it's all disconnected in smaller stories, but then some people want that big single narrative where they want the expansion starts and there's Anduin at the start of World of Warcraft in the expansion, and there he is at the end, and you follow him the whole way through. And I like that DDO takes kind of like that kind of piecewise approach.
And we've tried some longer stories. It gets tricky because people can get fatigued of them. Like, if you look at what we did back in the day with Necropolis, by the time all of those Necropolis chunks came out, people were like, oh my god, I am so tired. Because you're sort of seeing the same look and feel over and over again across a long period of time.
And some of those quests are tiring. So there are some of the more tiring quests in DDO. They're very polarizing.
Yeah.
The rat quest always comes to mind. So
And then you have some of the stuff like what we've tried with the Codex War, where the Codex War has been sort of playing out across multiple different kinds of mini story arcs, but you could, in theory, I don't know how many people consciously follow the Codex War, but you can look at the activities of the Codex War and follow it through, some Shavarath related stuff and Gatekeeper stuff, and just there's lots of different things going on, even though that thread of the Codex is following all the way through.
Yeah.
So but it's not as pronounced. It's not as pronounced as what happened in the Necropolis. Necropolis was like, black rabbit in your face, like all these skeletons and shadows or whatever, like over and over and over and over. And the Codex has a lot more variety.
A lot of, especially because we had to go to like different places. You got Ravenloft and Feywild and everything else. Actually, I don't think Ravenloft was Codex related, but
yeah, I think Ravenloft was our
portal
departure. Yeah. And that's the thing, right? Is with the Codex War, we've been able to sort of take breaks from it when we need to. If we're like, you know what, we're not ready to tell the next chunk of Codex War story, instead we want to focus over here, we can do that. Sometimes it's nice to have interludes.
So since you look at the thing from the top down, we talked about the things that DDO has like strengths, but obviously because you can see everything, what do you think are some of the issues that DDO is currently facing like right now that are some of the biggest ones? And of the ones that you see, what are kind of like the shorter long-term solutions of those kind of things? So
one of the things is just we've sort of aged. Like there's parts of the infrastructure that have gotten old. I know like everybody's going to want me to get into things like character builds and stuff like that. And yes, that's there. But I'm talking like the things that let more people come to DDO or come back to DDO, right? Yep. It can be simple things that we kind of take for granted if you've been playing for a long time. Like the sign-up page doesn't work on mobile. Like, that's a terrible experience. You tell your friend to sign up, how many people are necessarily sitting at the PC when they do it? They're probably talking to you over a mobile device of some type at the time.
Yep.
And it'd be nice to be able to just kick them the link and then they can just open it right there and do it. They're not going to download the game client from their mobile device, but being able to do the sign-up part so that when they get home that night, they're like, okay, now I download it. There's a lot of things like that where the infrastructure has just gotten old. And so it's the long, not small process of facelifting that stuff. Or the websites, right? As the websites have gotten older and older, they're getting rustier and rustier on newer browser updates, right? So the good news is many of these things are things that even before switching to this role, I had escalated from my own role to be like, we really need to start addressing some of this stuff, right?
Yeah.
And so we had started taking on projects. Like you'll notice that we updated the DDO market. That was the first big chunk. Yep. We're going to be working on the new website this year. I think one of the last pieces will probably be the forums, because ironically the forums was the most complicated. I don't know how that managed to be the case. Because you'd think it'd just be like, woo, move from one people's into another or something.
Yeah, exactly.
But, no, that is sadly not the case. There's just a lot of chunks of the system like that we're going through and wanting to clean up. And even, things like, hey, you talk your friend into coming back, right? And you're like, okay, come play with me. And man, the choice paralysis at the low end of the game is rough. You walk in and you're like, okay, now where do I go? Because there's, like you say, there's no linear story sort of forcing you to go in a direction. So you're like, the tricky thing about humans is that when given more than 2 or 3 choices, the best choice to make is no choice at all.
Yep, it's a Netflix problem. I'll just open up Netflix, look at 10 movies, and go, I don't need this, and turn it off.
Yeah, exactly. And so we want to make sure that and also some of the tutorial, it was great for the time that it came out, but could stand to be refreshed because the way gamers play now is different than they played back in circa 2009. Even the refresh we did in 2011. So it just lots of things like that. It's like build problems and loot problems; those are solvable, right? That's literally just like, okay, we just prioritize things we want to do. But some of those other things, those take a lot more elbow grease. But they're so impactful because they're the gate behind which all the other future and returning DDO players must pass through.
So on that subject, just as like a quick follow up, some of the features you mentioned that like have already been updated. So like DDO Market is one of those things that's been updated already. That's the sort of thing that's still going to continue to evolve over time. I just know there was a lot of features that people wanted that they could do on the old one, just like buying something for a friend, right? Which is like, oh, happy birthday! I bought you an expansion, and now we can't. So.
Yeah. That there are things like that are in our wish list essentially, and we just have to get down the wish list. Because gifting is huge. we also, even some of it's just really simple stuff. Like right now we've got the newest things sort of at the top and the older things are kind of at the bottom. And before, if you wanted to get to the older things, you were like scroll, 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 scroll. And so being able to actually just jump right to the other offers, that's such a small change, but it was one of those things that was like, oh yeah, we need to do that too. And feedback is a huge part of that, right? As people engage with the store, just seeing how people are using it, where are the places that are different than what they used to be able to do, just lots of stuff like that. And that's just an iterative process, right?
Yeah.
So we kind of wanted to see what it's like what's the flow like after we get the website facelifted in general? Because right now it's kind of awkward because you're going from the sort of newly refreshed market, but then you're passing through sort of the older website. So we want to see what's it like after we sort of get the whole kit and caboodle working the way it needs to work.
Get both pieces kind of working together and then kind of gather data on that one first.
Yeah.
That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. I know. I hate to talk all web stuff, right?
Well, it's important. Like, to be fair, it is very, very important. Because when you look at like new players coming into the game and onboarding, there are so many games where it's just like so easy to just turn on the game and get started. It takes a second. You just click a button, boom, you're already in the game. And so you got to be competitive in the nature, and it's important to do that.
Exactly.
And actually, speaking of character onboarding and people getting started, one of the problems that I personally noticed, I live stream all day. I get to interact with new players all the time. And it's kind of one of the greatest things about doing this on Twitch. But one of the problems is that it's really hard to get started in DDO. It always has been because the game is complicated. But even now, the pre-made characters are, like, I've been playing them. Oh man, they're very badly designed. And just people get confused. The onboarding's all over the place. Are there plans to kind of adjust how the onboarding works in DDO outside of just like obviously being able to sign up on your phone, but to play?
So I don't have specific announcements, but I can definitely tell you that is a thing that we have been studying carefully. But I don't have like a plan to tell you about today, at least not one that I'm ready to tell you about. But that whole early experience from the point at which you hit the website all the way into your getting out of the early story, that's the area we want to take another look at. And that can include the character creation process, all that stuff. It's all on the table because all of those things have been around for a really long time. So, and we know that DDO is a robust game. Like that character customization piece is also the most daunting piece for people, right?
It is, yeah. It's an uphill battle a lot of times where people just don't know where to put their points and where to put their skills. And
trying to do pre-made builds for people is always tough. Like I think even at the time that some of those builds were made, they may have been made back when some of them might have been okay-ish at the time. But now since builds have changed so much since then, nowhere close, right? It's just different. And it's not a small task for the systems folks to make those pre-made paths. And so we're going back and forth about, like, do we even want to keep trying to offer them? It's like if you come to a new game and it says, here, try these starter characters. It's like, do you tend in other games to feel like we're going to have a good time if you choose those? I don't know. So we have to do some more assessments on it and see. The main thing is we don't want to handhold you so hard that you lose sight of the fact that you could make what you want to make.
Yeah.
But we don't want to leave you completely out in the void to where you're like, I have no clue what to make and I'm stuck. I don't know what to do.
Yeah. So. Do you have kind of like maybe, I don't know, an idea as to how you think the ideal scenario should be for when somebody gets started with DDO? Like, I guess, like in your mind, because you've been playing the game for a long time, you talked to a ton of players. So like when somebody gets started, what do you think is like the right process that they should be following?
So I think that the way that the game is set up, it tries to do this, but I think we can do better, is since people get so overwhelmed by choices, is to cone those choices down a bit more.
Yeah.
Instead of presenting you the breadth all at once, ask it some things earlier in the process. And also, we might be able to update the way it looks for people who are coming in who maybe never played 3.5.
Yeah,
like they're used to a different rule set altogether. And so what are the constants in the D&D universe that have stayed sort of true throughout the editions? And can we lean into that a little more to help people sort of get through that first step? And then the next step would be once we get them past making the character, are we doing a good enough job showing you the mechanics, the basic mechanics that you're going to need to play the thing? Yeah. And then beyond that, do you know where you want to go? And can we help you know where you want to go? That's sort of the pieces that I'd like to see us get to.
Yeah, that makes sense.
There are many different ways to try to address those things, but those are the concepts that I'm focused on.
Like, from my perspective, those are also the same things I've seen from people. Usually the questions I get asked are like, how do I make a good character, and also where do I go? Like
In a
I made it
social
to town. What do
game,
I do?
yeah, like in a social game where you're playing with like groups of people, the what can I do? You're sort of trusting that the other players are like telling you the right thing. But the what do I make is much harder. Nobody wants to walk in and feel like, oh, I made a terrible character build, and like no one's going to want to play with me in this grouping game. I mean, you can solo and stuff, but when you're in a space like this and you see all these other people, you're like, I want to be able to play with them and feel like, woo, my character can contribute.
Yeah. That fear, that paralysis where people are worried about playing with others because they don't know how good their character is going to be is a very real thing.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Like even friends that I bring in that, they're like personal friends that'll come in, and I have a friend that was making an alchemist, and, he's going along and he's like, oh my God, am I doing it wrong? And he didn't realize that the piece of content that we had coincidentally chosen to play that night, the monsters had a particular resistance against his build. He had made this like super narrow build, but in that particular content, most things had like huge amounts of resistance to that particular setup. And so he was like, oh my God, did I do it wrong? It's like, no, you just bad luck at the draw. If we would have been playing this content or any of these things, you would have been fine. We literally, by coincidence, picked the one type of monster. Yep. I think it was like devils or something. We picked the one type of monster that you're just like, nope, nothing I can do.
Yeah, it's a tough realization for a lot of people when like you play other video games where monsters are kind of cosmetically the same. Like every monster in like Lord of the Rings can be stunned. Doesn't matter what type of monster it is, you just stun them. But you play DDO and you're like, wait a minute, all these categories are immune and some monster types are special and they're immune, and these
there's a lot going on.
Yeah.
So yeah, those are the kinds of things that I have my eye on.
Well, I know a lot of people have been gotten started playing Dungeons & Dragons Online pretty recently because you guys did that like DDO free quests coupon. So like, have you guys, like, what kind of success have you seen from like all the influx of new players and from the coupon and stuff? And have you decided any cool adjustments to make based on how you've given away content for now, like in terms of planning for the future?
So in terms of, when it came out, we saw a huge amount of success with it. And one of the big ones was the first wave. We obviously, we talked about the fact that we had released it during the pandemic, right? The first one, you didn't even need like a code. We just sort of opened the floodgates, right?
Yep.
And at the time, it was funny because all of us in-house had sort of had the same conclusion at once, which was we were all isolated. In my case, I was sick for like weeks. And at that point, the main social outlet I had was DDO. And friends that were like, hey, I know we can't come over this weekend, but what if we played DDO together? I'm like, you know what? This is a really rough time in the world, like the planet. And wouldn't it be nice if everybody can just play? I know that like it's opening the gates a lot, but at the same time, I'm sure that you get enough people in the door, and it'll be sort of counterbalanced by all the little widgets that they're going to get. Like people are going to need potions, people are going to check out premium classes, whatever. That's probably all going to wash out in the end, right? It'll be fine. So that was the idea, right? It's like just literally, the world sucks right now. Let's just try to add one mote of not suckiness to the world. And it was more than that, right? It was really good. People sort of came out of the woodwork to be like, oh my gosh, obviously lured by the idea of like free stuff. Like you can't beat
free is
the
free.
term
It's good
free.
Stuff.
Free
is
is free is great, right? Yeah. But then just seeing everybody together, and then it just sort of dominoed around really well. And then we were like, well, okay, as soon as we turn this off, well, people will go away because, the gates will be back up again. I was like, well, okay, what if we just let the people who showed up, right, everybody who came up for this party, what if we let them keep it, right? They were good enough to come out, hanging out with us during a pandemic. What if they get to keep it? We'll just make this code and we'll go. Well, turns out that was really awesome for people.
Yeah,
and they were really excited. Like, I figured that people would like it, but it was like, okay, no, people who we thought this would be just appealing to the first wave of people that came in. It was just like, yeah, everybody who showed up this month would like it. But all of a sudden we had even more people be like, oh my God, the free thing again. And so then we were like, wow, this is really cool. You get this cool surge of people. It gives you that excuse to like poke your old guildie who you haven't talked to in a couple of years. You're like, hey man, I got the code, and they would be like, oh, I guess I'll check it out, right?
It's the perfect time to tell a friend to start playing because they're like, buy all the stuff? I don't know. Wait, did you say free? I guess I should install it.
Guess I should give it a try, right? Yep. And so then we did another wave of it here recently, and so now I'm sort of pondering. We have to be careful because on one hand you also have things like people who are on the VIP. And it's like, well, wait a minute. I thought VIP was about getting access to the stuff, but if the stuff is like there all the time, now what? Right?
Yep.
So it's been really nice. I really love it, but we're also looking closely at what does this mean like long term for VIPs, or how much do we want to do this? Does it sort of spoil it if we're doing it too much? Like is then when you go to poke your friend that fourth time they don't care anymore? Like, so we're assessing. I think it's been really effective. I really love doing those sort of, hey, everybody pay attention to the thing. People like DDO. When we have an exciting thing going on, they pay attention. And so for me, that's my favorite part about the free coupon. We just have to think carefully now about how do we make sure that the people who had a value proposition that was pinned against content access, how do we make sure they're not left?
Yeah. So has the kind of the information and stuff you gotten from this informed at all the decision to make all of the Player's Handbook 5th edition races and classes just free in the game? Because for those of you that don't know, next week, all that stuff is free. Monk, Druid, Warlock, Half-Orc, Half-Elf, Dragonborn, Drow, Gnome, Tiefling, and Wood Elf. Oh, I didn't mess it up. Are all free next week. So is that kind of related? Like, is it a similar thing?
It's similar. One of the, in the process of seeing like all these people coming back to the game, right, including our friends and family and stuff, right? And over time, you don't really think about it when you're playing on VIP or when you're sort of keeping up current with the game. If you are somebody who's coming back to the game for the first time, you look in the character creation screen and it's like a wall of purchases.
Yep.
And you're a free-to-play game, and so it was sort of like it used to be, it was sort of the other way around. It was like there was a lot of free stuff and then just like a few paid things. And we sort of, over time, because we've added and added and added to the game, that ratio got like way lopsided. To where it's very intimidating, right? We're like, okay, most of the stuff has been out for a long time. What if we just take the stuff that's sort of, we pick a chunk that makes sense? To us, it was Player's Handbook, right? When you think about starting in D&D, you get that book, and it has certain races and classes that are just, boom, they're part of the package, right?
Yep.
And then the ancillary stuff comes in those side books. So we're like, what if we start with the ones that people would sort of expect to find free? Because they're used to playing, like let's take Dragonborn, right? A lot of 5th edition players are going to be used to being able to make a Dragonborn. How sad are you if you come into DDO and you're like, oh, I can't make a Dragonborn? I have to pay for it. I don't even know if I like this game yet.
Yeah, you can. It's just like $8. Make a Dragonborn.
Yeah. So now it's like you don't even have that decision point. You're just like, if I loved playing my Dragonborn 5th ed, I log in, I'm like, well, I'm just my character. And it's like, oh, and what's this other? And we'll still have like those other premium offers for you, but letting people get that basic, like, I want to make the tabletop character that I loved making experience, like just right as they're starting off and getting to know how much they're going to like DDO or not. This was just a natural pick. So it'll flip that feeling when you're first logging in that you're like, hey, I'm here to this free game. It claims to be a free game. And yeah, we do have free content for you. We've got free quests and we have free races and classes for you to enjoy too.
So with this happening, this leaves just a few classes and races that are not free. So you've got, shifters, I think, in
shifters,
ASMR?
ASMR. Technically, so one thing I can tell you about, because I've seen people asking questions about it, and we're going to have like a, the more detailed anniversary page for people to really spell it out. But somebody was like, well, wait a minute, if Drow's free, what happens to Drow Favor?
Yeah.
And so what we're going to do is we're going to take Warforged, which was one of the currently paid ones. We're going to let Warforged take the place of where Drow was for Favor. So now you can either buy Warforged or you can unlock the Warforged with the 400 Favor.
For sure.
So that's one. And then another one is the starter pack right now. I'm probably going to have to take the starter pack down for a little bit until we can fix it up. Because right now it's offering Dragonborn inside of it.
Which is going to be free.
Way to be free. So I'm probably going to switch that one for ASMR. Because thematically, I think it'll probably go pretty well.
I'm playing an ASMR favorite soul right now in the game. So goes together. Okay, that makes a lot of sense. I was mostly just thinking about... it's just, to me, there's like that odd idea where there's just the two premium classes. I know people oftentimes will get stuck in this mindset of like, it's premium, therefore it must be better. It must be the new thing. It's got to be the greatest thing, even though that's not always the case. I mean, Warforged are the greatest, and now you can get them for basically free. So, yeah. All right, cool.
I love my Warforged. And you do have to be careful with that, right? Like we look at that with adventure packs way back in the day when Catacombs, before it had its revamp. We used to worry because the Catacombs, we didn't know how to price it. Because we're like, if we set the price too low, everybody will try it. And we don't think the Catacombs is the strongest content necessarily, especially at that level, because it's very early in the game. And we're like, but if we price it too much, then people will think it's special and they have to check it out because it must be better. It's got a bigger price tag.
Yep,
like,
prices set expectations.
Yeah, so we're like, how do we make the catacombs? So ultimately, the decision was just make the catacombs better, and that way we don't have to worry so much about somebody hitting it and being like, this quest makes no sense.
Does that kind of
So
like just dovetailing off that? Does that kind of inform the decision as to why some of the like very old classic DDO packs that have been in the game since literally day one? I remember spending years running Tanglewood Gorge, and you're on part 5, and the cleric says, "Oh man, I gotta go. My mom says I can't play anymore," and now you spend an hour in town waiting for a cleric to start at part 5. Is that similar situation with some of those older quest packs where you don't want to just either make them free or too cheap because they're maybe not up to the quality of content you want to see?
exactly, what we're trying to do is focus on if we're gonna have a piece of content that we're worried about driving people through, and then those people are gonna have a bad experience and bounce, then we want to try to facelift it and then make those kinds of adjustments where possible. So like you say, like just the other night, the reason I was mentioning Necropolis is because I was literally just playing through. I was trying to get a dagger for my rogue, and there's that one part of the chain where you still have to get the freaking scarabs, right? You still have to get the scarabs to
Yep.
unlock the Shadow Lord stuff, and it's
Yep.
like that's not in-game content anymore. The reason that thing was set up the way it was set up is because way back in the day, you were trying to set it up such that people would have to play it a lot because it was the end of the game.
Yeah, they need to do something for 3 months before the next pack comes
Right?
out.
Yeah, we don't need to do that anymore. It's like, why make a person run all 5 of these suckers? Like, just let them play the thing once, and then they're good. And then after that, they can play whichever one they want out of order, or whatever. It doesn't matter because they've gone through them once and they're good now. More
Yep.
like a modern stuff. So it's things like that. It's like if we're gonna have people touching that older stuff, we do want to give it a little makeover before we drive a bunch of people through it.
Yeah.
Because tangleroot's my comfort food. Like I go there when I want to just sort of brain out, but I'm doing that solo. I'm never trying to like drag people through it with me.
Yeah, I run Tangleroot probably every second life. It's just the nostalgia is too good for me.
It's such nostalgia,
just
right?
a part of my brain, and I'm like, this is so fun.
Do you ever get the weird feeling when you go in to fight like Whisper Doom and you're like, oh man, I remember when I was afraid of you?
I get the weird feeling because sometimes I go in and I'm like, I can kill Whisper Doom now because light damage didn't exist when the Whisper Doom was made.
Yep.
So you just goodbye, and it's very, very weird.
I don't even know how, but I feel like Whisper Doom used to even be like bigger. Like for some reason when I
yeah, it always felt bigger.
Oh,
I think it's because more of us played halflings back in the day because that +1 armor class was everything. So you're just used to seeing it from that low angle.
Maybe. I always played humans a lot in the old days, so I don't know. I think it's just, I think it was the presence. There was like a psychological presence that she had that she sort of lacks now.
Yeah, I played whatever. I think a lot of humans, but the second Drow came out, Drow. Every character was a Drow. Didn't matter what it was. Barbarian, cleric, doesn't matter. Good
nice.
So on the subject of like also cost value, people are really excited. Free stuff is good. I love getting free stuff. So does everybody else. We got free quests. We got free classes and races. And that takes a lot of my VIP and a lot of other people's VIPs. And so as cool as it is, it's kind of like, there's a little bit of lost value there. And I know that in the producer's letter, there's going to be daily gold rolls for everybody that's going to be VIP until the end of the year, which is actually crazy. If you don't know how good that is, it's way better than I thought it was when I got the original, what was it, the season pass?
The season pass.
It's so much better. So it's actually a very, very good deal. But I noticed the footnote of until the end of the year. And I also play Lord of the Rings Online, which is managed by Strimtom Games. And in that game, they added a special VIP bonus effect, which basically gives you huge quality of life. Vendoring from your inventory, bank from your inventory, doing a bunch of crafting from your inventory, being able to like completely ignoring repair damage. So you never have to talk to the repair guy and stuff. Just really a bunch of good things. Are you guys considering doing something, not even similar vein, but kind of amping up the VIP to go along with something like that, a more permanent benefit?
So the funny thing is, even one of the conversations that we were having before the pandemic hit, back in like the end of 2019, myself and the other marketers were discussing the fact that we were worried about the VIP program. We were watching it on Lotro, but on DDO especially. We were worried about the value of the program in general. So we're like, people complain that like, yeah, I'm paying my membership, but I could just unsub and like buy stuff a la carte. Why do we even need to have a membership? And it was tricky because when the membership, the VIP membership was created originally back free to play, it was never meant to be this like, it was never meant to be better than being an a la carte buyer. It was meant to be a sort of a comfort blanket for people who were used to playing an MMO with a subscription. Right. They didn't want to deal with an e-store with a bunch of whatever. Okay, you don't have to. You can just keep subbing and life is just normal. Yep. Right? Yeah, I still get my quests, I still get my stuff, and here's some extra perks.
Yeah, I don't own any of the content, so it's just VIP.
Exactly. And then over time, more and more of the VIPs got used to like, okay, I understand what the store's about now. I get it. Okay. Well, now that I don't feel like I need my sub, what's my sub for necessarily? So then people kind of go back and forth on like, is it just easier for me to not have to a la carte worry about buying things and I can just pay the sub a little bit when I need to and then not when I don't, and just, all those sort of deliberations. So for us, what we want is, the program is named VIP. What does that say to you when you hear that phrase? It's supposed to make you feel special, right? And we're like, if the program isn't feeling special, then, it needs some help. Like, so what we wanted to do was, okay, we're going to look at the program and we're going to see what are the things that we think people are sort of pinning the value on. What are things that they wish it had that we haven't done? And then can we come up with a new sort of I don't want to say bundle because that's not quite the right word, but a new version of VIP that does address that disparity.
Right.
And then the pandemic hit. And so we had to shift gears rapidly. But that has been a topic that we have wanted to tackle. And so part of the getting the gold daily dice, that was like my really fast, like, you know what? I know we want to do this. Birthday is right here.
Yep.
For now, let's just give the VIP something really good. Yep. Because I do want to come back to the program in general. And I have to imagine that a year from now, I'm going to know like the new things that people are going to be excited about. So what this means is, knowing this, me especially, we're going to be looking for feedback from people about what do you want VIP to be about, right? If it's no longer about, ungating content access because we're doing these like free initiatives, then what are the things that you are like, I wish I could fill in the blank, right? I'm a VIP and I wish that meant what? Like I've seen people talk about the teleport idea, right? The idea that you can just go right to whatever quest you need to go to.
Yep.
I would love to be able to do things like some cool gifting stuff maybe. I don't know if I can get it within the year, but there's just lots of different things we could do with the program. So I'm really interested in hearing what are things that people would be excited about. Because the other trick with VIP is sometimes we went through a period through like 2011 or 2012, we kept sort of peppering different VIP perks in, but the way that they were peppered in, you sort of would lose track of what you were getting as a VIP.
Yep.
And so there's all these weird little perks where you're like, wait, do I get that? I didn't even notice. And so I want whatever these things are to be meaningful so that when you're like, I'm a VIP, in your head, you can immediately think of what that benefit is. And also, if there's current VIP benefits that content topic aside, if there's some of those other things like, are VIPs excited about the fact that they get the hard and elite unlock? Are VIPs excited about the fact that we'll go through and give extra widgets compared to non-VIP? Like, what are the things that you're like, yeah, keep doing that. Don't cut that part. If we're moving into a world where we're like, you know what, VIP is about being treated like a VIP in DDO, right? What does that mean for you as a DDO?
So it sounds like you guys like really want to kind of reimagine the whole topic as opposed to just be like, oh, it's VIP, but it's got a hat on it. Kind of really figure out what you want to do. And I can probably think of like 10 things.
I know everybody's going to have it. Like, what it should be? I'm like, yes, please.
And chat's and because this is live, so chat is filling up with the ideas.
Oh, I'm sure, right?
So if
I'm
you
trying
guys,
to like look in the other window without like distracting myself.
Yeah. If you guys are keen to get your VIP things, you're more than welcome to post them in chat, although most of them are going to get drowned in the sea. Or this is going on YouTube, so you can obviously post them on the YouTube video, which is going to get drowned in the sea. Or post them probably on the forums where Sandstone Games staff actually read comments and stuff. So that would be probably if you were going to do that, probably somewhere around there. Although you're more than welcome to help boost up my numbers on YouTube, so please do that. So I kind of want to move into something else that I think is kind of sort of adjacent to some of the things where starting out a game like Dungeons & Dragons, you want to have a party. You want to have an adventuring party. It's a good experience. So when somebody gets started, figuring out how to group is always one thing. But that's a problem that is like so hard to manage. How do you even tackle? How do you get a new player to want to play with other players or get engaged? The problem that people have right now is that there's this awesome thing. I love you guys did this. Hardcore season is the greatest. I love hardcore. It's so fun. But if you don't love hardcore, you have the one server where everyone is playing and there's groups all the time and everyone's having an awesome time. And then you have the other servers where everyone's just kind of like, waiting for their groups to fill and there's not as many people there. Do you guys have any like plans to tackle this problem or help address this? Because Hardcore Season 6 is coming up, and this is definitely going to happen again. So.
Yep. So one of the things we have to do now that we've had a couple of hardcore seasons under our belt, is we're wanting to look and go, okay, here is the result of running them. Because when we first did hardcore, it was kind of an experiment, right? We were like, okay, we think we want to do this. We think people will have fun with it. But what does it ultimately mean to their, like, do people play it and then do they sort of bounce back to their main servers, or do they not do that at the end of the season? Are there people who expressly play on hardcore and when the season's over, they just ghost until the next season? Like, there's all kinds of social dynamics with it.
Yeah.
But in order to know what those dynamics are, you have to run a few of them so that you can then go back and like assess it. And so we're in that sort of assessment phase. We think we want to do in the next season, we're going to try another little rules shakeup. But at the same time, as we're working on that, we are also going to be taking the time to look at, okay, while we're prepping this next season, that everybody knows the next season is coming, and that's a thing, we can be looking at what are the things that we can do that are helping. So for example, when we first did hardcore, we were trying to set it to where nobody could transfer off until the end.
Right.
Well, and then the result was like, you're like, well, I can't transfer and I'm kind of done. I'm not going to go for this goal. So see ya.
Yep.
So we're like, well, okay, clearly that's not great. So then we tried to set it up in the more subsequent times to be like, you can transfer off when you're done, right? If you're playing and you're like, blah, I'm out, I've had it, then you can just transfer off right then.
Yep.
Instead of making you wait and have to come back at the end of the season for those characters. So that's an example of a small pivot that we did. But what I'd like to do is be able to spend some time focused on hardcore and see what else needs to happen. So I don't have the what we're doing piece of it for you yet, but I have the first step is always what's going on, from a data perspective.
I mean, you have to understand the problem before you can really tackle it, and I will say the problem that always comes up is people say like, oh, I can't find anyone to play with on my server during hardcore. And as a person who plays hardcore day 1 to the last day, I understand that, but also I like hardcore and I don't want it to go away, and I'm going to be playing on it. So I don't know how to solve this problem, but I'm going to play on hardcore until it's fixed. So it's a tough one. You have people on kind of both sides of the in this scenario.
Because it does create a situation where, for a person that doesn't like to play that style of, high risk kind of gameplay, and then you have this pool of high risk gameplay people who also coincidentally have a heavy overlap with the people that love to make groups with everybody. And those people sort of shunt over to a different, almost a different experience altogether, because it's not like you can engage with them in the same way.
Yeah.
So when that happens, it's like, how do we solve for that? I think it's going to be something that we have to think through very carefully, because we don't want to do something that makes the people who are really enjoying hardcore feel like, oh, great, now hardcore is not fun anymore.
Yeah.
But then you also have to have the non-hardcore people like, well, what about me? What do I get to do while the hardcore people are doing? Right? So those are the things we're thinking through. Like, one of the things we kicked around that we haven't tried yet was, what if when hardcore debuts, certain festivals debut? Like, if we're doing new, cool, interesting mechanics, are there non-permadeath versions of that mechanic that would happen also on the live servers for everybody who's not playing in the permadeath part of it?
So, like, if there was a new series of champions in hardcore, then there'd be, like, the festival or whatever, and then all of a sudden, if you're not playing on hardcore, you still engage with the neat content or whatever it is, without having to force yourself into it.
Yep. And so what that would do is it would concentrate more of those sort of people who show up for, like, new stuff, but aren't necessarily hardcore people. It would cause them to come back around the same time. And so that could help, but we're still thinking through the dynamics of that.
Yeah, I know for sure some people like myself, like I really enjoyed Hardcores 2 and 4 where there were different champion types, because it just changes up the game so much that even though I could play on the regular servers, I accomplished my goals and I did everything, I want to play with this new thing because I know what's going away. And so if it was just on the regular server, it's like, well, I finished up my goals, but I can still play the new thing. Yeah, that's definitely interesting. I like that idea. That's very cool. Speaking of,
they have no short supply of hardcore ideas.
Yeah. When it comes to new things, new players are important. And I've noticed that a lot of other games, like other MMOs, will do like small scale events to get people interested. So DDO, it has like the weekend bonus and things, but those are for like the existing players. But a game that I enjoy quite a lot is Elder Scrolls Online, and they'll just go, hey guys, the game is free for 4 days. Download it, it's free, install it, you can play all the content, and then it's gone. Or you can buy it and keep playing it. DDO never really does that. Like, they did the free DDO free quest, which is awesome, but then it's gone. Have you guys thought about doing like smaller scale events like that, or things to kind of pull
So-
people in for a short period of time?
We used to. A long time ago, we used to have sort of the free weekend concept, right? Sometimes it would be free access to certain classes. Other times we were doing free. Back when we were subscription, we would even have like free. We used to call it Welcome Back Weekend.
Oh yeah, yeah, I remember this.
Welcome Back Weekends, right? And they do okay. The one that did less okay, honestly, was the smaller stuff. Like when we were entirely subscription gated, and when you sort of open the gates, it was a bigger deal.
Mm-hmm.
And when we tried to do like, hey, this was back when we had added Druid, for example. Like, hey, come play the Druid for free. The only way you could get the Druid is if you got Motu. So if you want to try the Druid's back. And we didn't really seem to get a lot of traction.
Yeah.
The free coupon, on the other hand, I think it's the difference of just the scale of it. Like you were like, you know what, oh my god, all the free stuff means, but if you're not engaged with the product and you hear, hey, Druid, what does Druid mean to you if you're not a DDO player already?
Yeah.
Right? You're like, is that good? Is that bad?
You don't have to qualify. Yeah,
know.
exactly. You don't know how to qualify it. You're just like, Druid, I guess.
Yeah. And then, like, because we have such like a mix, since we're not linear, we have such a mix of content. If we're doing like, oh, we're gonna do a free weekend on these particular quest packs, it's like, well, but there's a whole bunch of other ones that have been free all the time, so there's not really a differential there.
Yeah.
So it's just a matter of what are the things that make people excited when you do those events, and is there enough time for the message to get out for them to be excited about it? So I think the free coupon thing has been really effective because it's just so simple to understand. If you hear it, you like don't have to think, and you understand, well, clearly it must have value because it's everything.
Yeah, the whole game is free, so just give it a
Right?
shot. Yeah.
Yeah.
Is that like
So, yeah,
probably? I was gonna say, do you think that's probably the most motivating thing, or has there been other things that you found? Because you've been doing this for such a long time and looking at the marketing of this. What are other things that like people find really like super motivating in terms of how do you get like the DDO community to mobilize the best?
Definitely free stuff that you can tell your friend about easily.
Yep.
Right. So if you're like, hey, there's free stuff, or when we do like free code giveaways, things like that, those are really easy concepts to grasp, and they're really easy to tell your friend very quickly about. Those are really effective.
Yep.
When there's a new, really big, interesting chunk of the D&D universe that is like really popular. If we, like when we did Temple of Elemental Evil, for example,
Right.
like, oh my god, Temple of Elemental Evil, I know that. That tends to motivate people because like a lot of the people that like this game like the D&D IP, and there's so many like there's just things that have become, you know, over time kind of part of like pop culture even, that when you hear that you're going to you know, try to think of a good one to throw out that like is really buzzworthy, right? It's Saltmarsh, to be honest. When people are like, oh my god, Saltmarsh, I remember playing Saltmarsh and blah blah, and they
you're seeing people posting like on their books and things that they have, and like the old box set, because they're so excited about it, and Ravenloft as well. Yeah. Yep.
So anytime that we're able to hone in on a really well-known chunk of the D&D universe, that motivates people. What, it doesn't even matter if it's like free or not free or whatever. Just the fact that it's happening is like, what? So that's been very effective as well.
All right. So what I'm hearing from this is in the future we've got Strahd moving into the haunted halls of Eveningstar, now in Saltmarsh.
Indeed.
It's just, everyone's gonna buy it. Everyone's got to go.
Yeah, and it's funny because also those are like the same things that motivate the team. Like when we say, "Hey guys, we're going to work on Isle of Dread," everybody's like, "Oh, I want to be the first one to work on the next one." You know, like that also motivates us, and we're like building that stuff like just with such a passion. So it makes it, anything that we go like, oh my god, we're like, okay, that's what we need to do, because everybody who's D&D fan is also going to do that.
Yeah, it's the benefit of working in an office with a bunch of nerds. You're just like, oh, you guys are excited? Okay, good, we're good.
Yeah. It's the first sniff test. It's like, if none of us are excited about it, like, why would any of the players be excited about it?
Yeah. When it comes to, I guess like the new content and the IP, we just actually had something. And this is kind of sort of related, where there's more content coming out for Feywild, which is really cool. So there's the new pack coming out next week, Hunter and the Hunted. Yep. And the quests are amazing, so you guys should be excited to play those. I had an awesome time with them, and the raid is super cool. And people that don't own Feywild can play those. Is that like sort of like opening the door, I guess, for other sort of things in a similar vein, where it's like,
oh yeah,
I didn't own the Ravenloft, but there's a new pack or something.
Yep. No, that is the thing that we do like to do, is that we try to think of the different universes in D&D, it's not like every single solitary thing from Feywild has to be contained in this one expansion and then never again. Right? We like being able to come back and revisit those universes and tell even more stories there.
Yeah.
In the same way that if you had like a tabletop campaign, if you want to run through Sharn and then you're like, you know what, I'm gonna go to Zendrick for a while. Okay, you know what, I'm gonna go back to Sharn. I've got even like we can do that, and I think it's really exciting to be able to do that.
Yeah, I know that when I think it was Search and Rescue released, which is the quest in Eveningstar, we have to rescue this gnome and her adventurer friends. It takes place in the Stonelands, and it's also a free-to-play quest. And I literally know so many people that were like, "The Stonelands? We can go to the Stonelands now?" And they were just stoked about more Eveningstar stuff.
Yeah.
So
exactly. Like I like the D&D universes to feel like they're places you can go. Maybe certain chunks of them are carved up access-wise in different ways, but they're a place that you're going. It's not like having the entire story stuffed in just like one expansion pack. I feel like it would make it feel small.
Yeah.
Like you wouldn't feel like it's a world that you're going to. You'd feel like it's kind of a slice. But being able to say, hey, there are multiple chunks of this of the universe that you can go to, like that's super important to me, that would be able to do that with people.
Yeah. And I like the level of creativity that DDO can take, where you guys just kind of like get to tell your own parts of the story as well as you're going into it, which is fun.
Exactly.
Now, I know a pain point that happens to a lot of people is that one of the best things about DDO is the reincarnation process, where we get to like literally reincarnate. You can build up your character forever. You never really run out of content to do. And also there's always like people running around the low levels and mid-level content.
Yep.
And it means that all that stuff is still valuable. So, you can release a content pack for level 7s, and I will run it as much as a new player might run the content and go through for the first time. But like, there's a lot of people that either don't like the reincarnation system, or there's like 12 that finished. They have all their past lives, and they don't really have anything to do, or even just people that like to stay at the level cap. And I think that is kind of like a major problem, especially for myself. I leave characters at the level cap just in case I have friends who want to play, but I can't really do a whole lot with them other than like, okay, my friends play, we do stuff, but they got their gear, and reincarnating takes a long time, and they don't really kind of augment my account or anything else. It's just playing the game for the sake of playing the game. Have you guys thought about like this issue about what about not reincarnating, or how do you distribute, like what do I do with all this XP I'm getting that I can't use?
So that is a topic that's on my mind. I've started to broach it with the other staff because for me, I'm one of those people that I totally get reincarnating, right? I had a guy that I soloed up back when the level cap was 20, soloed up a monk, and then I was like, okay, I'm going to reincarnate, I'll go down and become an artificer instead. And then I was playing artificer for a while, and then I was like, okay, maybe I'll go back to monk. Couldn't make up my mind. And then I had other characters that I was running that I wasn't reincarnating because I was playing with friends or whatever. I have sort of I call it the conveyor belt system, where I have characters kind of staged at like every 2 levels, and they sort of inch along as I'm playing with like different friends. And so a couple of those ones that were at cap, I got into this phase where I was like, well, I don't want to reincarnate because I kind of want to just chill here and enjoy all these like abilities that I've opened at this level.
Yeah.
Like I feel like I've earned a certain mastery of this character, and I kind of want to like enjoy that. But then I don't have anything to work towards. What is the enjoyment? And it was different when we had the Epic Destiny system. The old system had a lot of problems, but one of the things it had was I always felt like I was doing something, right? Like I was sitting at cap, and I was like, well, at least I could be dumping progress into my other destinies, even though I'm never going to activate them. At least I feel like it's going somewhere, right? And now it's different now. So we don't have a solution yet, but it is a thing that I want us to focus on, because what I like about reincarnation is people feel like they're gaining mastery, right?
Yeah.
Like each life you're going through, you're getting better and better at DDO, and that's like this really cool accomplishment. And so if you're somebody who's not engaging with that loop for some reason, what are ways I can help you feel like you're getting mastery too? There's lots of different techniques. Sev and I have talked about a couple things. We don't have solid conclusions yet, but I want a person to always feel like I'm doing something that makes me feel really proud of the work that I've done playing DDO. Like that I'm excited about what I've managed to do in the game. And so for reincarnation people, there's so many good aspects of reincarnation, right? Like the mastery, like when you're at the low levels of the game, you see other people coming through, and most of those players are experiencing. Most times, because I go in and I'm like, hello, fellow players, I am a new person here. You would never know that it is Tolero. I always come in and I'm like, hello, everyone. What should I be doing?
Yep.
very, like, most of the time, everybody's super helpful. Like, you're talking to somebody that's on their, like, 30th life, but they're like, oh, here's what you need to know, little new player. Like, because you're getting those players to be down there in those levels and walking around with people and talking to each other. And it's just healthy. It's great. It's a really great thing.
Yeah.
But I totally get that feeling of like, but I just hit 30 and I really like this ability. And like, now I won't get to play with this ability if I reincarnate.
Yeah. And that problem is like super exacerbated because before you just had everything and everything was just passive. But now the coolest, most visually impressive abilities are all level 30 locked. And some people either just don't want to stay there because they feel like they're not progressing their character. And oh man, that's so hard because I'm like, no, time stomp is really cool. And look how cool it looks, says the person who presses it and then reincarnates because you can't progress once you get to that point. So, yeah, it's definitely a big problem. So I'm hoping you guys have some way to kind of tackle that one. Kind of on like a similar vein, especially because you talked about alts. Almost every modern game now has like an account thing where it's like, you know, I am working on my Paragon points, my champion points, my roster XP, my blah blah blah. DDO doesn't really have anything like that. I mean, I can put stuff in the shared bank. That's kind of doing that, but that's kind of it.
That's more twinking though, right? Like twinking has existed even before there was a shared bank.
Do you guys either have plans or have you just thought about the general idea of, you know, making stuff more so when I make an alt, it's not that big of a deal. It's like I'm still playing and progressing.
So that is another one of those, hey team, now that Tolero is here, we're going to have a conversation.
Yeah, exactly. Let's sit down and have a coffee. I brought the bagels and I locked the door, so let's figure this one out.
So same deal here. I don't have specific announcements or promises because I always hate like going on a stream and being like, and you know what, we're going to X, and then the systems folks that are like undoubtedly watching me from home right now are like, we're going to what?
But, yeah, exactly. Well, I just promised this thing, so
like I told him that we're totally building the such and such. Everybody.
So I used to work in sales, and that was like number one tactics. It's the best way to do it. Oh, you need this thing? No problem. I have it for you by Monday morning. Get back to the office. So I need this on Monday. I know it's 5:30 on Friday, but work the weekend. Okay, thanks. I'm gonna go. So
yeah, there's a thing that I originally wasn't planning on having it be an account thing, but the more I think about it, I think it would be better as an account thing that Torque and I and Sev have talked about. So what I'll probably do is go, since we're still in like we call it the primordial ideas phase, where we have an idea, we're just in that soundboardy, you know, no pencils have been put to paper yet kind of point, a lot of R&D. And I think I want to try to think through this thing that the three of us have talked about and what it would look like if I made it be account-based and see if that feels more interesting, less interesting. But no, I totally get, like, the favor system tries to be that, but it's very old and it's also very complex under the hood in terms of working.
And there's also a lot of wacky stuff where you unlock it, but it's character-based and not account-based. So, like, Falconry is 700 favor in the free agents, which is basically every quest, but it's only 500 DDO points. But unlocking it with favor is one character. 500 DDO points, which is not even a past life, is your whole account. And I'm sitting there being like, oh, what? Wait, what? So
yeah, the favor system, it has parts of it that are trying to be account, you know, that drow unlock back in the day, right? You're like, okay, I'm gonna favors, trying to hit drow, but it's not. It doesn't execute in the same way.
Yeah.
Like, because you're still having to sort of linearly work yourself along. So I'd like to see us do some things that are, again, it's about rewarding you for the fact that you're part of DDO. Like, that's what a lot of those systems are doing, are saying, hey, we value the fact that you're playing with us in general, in addition to the mastery that you're gaining on your individual characters.
I mean, that actually kind of brings me to this next question. What do you personally find like rewarding about like playing the game? What are some of the things that when you log in, you're like, these are the points that you hit where you're like, this is good for me?
That's very tough to describe.
Because you already said you're not big on reincarnation, so that's my thing. That's my jam. I love reincarnating.
It's weird because the thing I like the most about it is like the least to do with gameplay, but I think it's tainted by the fact that I work on the game, which is, there is just nothing better than going through it. All right, this is the best way I can describe it. Have you ever done like one of those escape rooms?
Yes. Yep.
Right? DDO has that big time escape room vibe where you bring in your friends that are maybe a little more casual playing, or maybe it's their first time playing, and there's just so much joy in seeing them experience it for the first time. Like, you'll walk into like a puzzle that you've done like a billion times, right? You see them sitting there going, sweating whether to turn which lever. or everybody does the thing where you're like, whoa, go pull the lever over there, and it's going to be like the big spectacle, right?
Yep.
Just those moments of like watching other people discover DDO for the first time is the most enjoyable part of my DDO play now.
Yeah.
Like if I were to think about the things that I got before that, I loved the combat system. I loved feeling like I don't have as much fun when it's just sort of like cued, timed things, and they're going to pop off no matter which way you're facing. I really enjoyed like having to position myself in a fight. So I find that very satisfying, and all the little sound effects and all that jazz.
Yeah.
That's really, really satisfying to me.
When you talk about that escape room feeling, it just reminds me of like a couple days ago on my live stream, I had somebody with me who had never done the quest Kind of a Big Deal, where after you get made big, you can't use the levers anymore.
Yeah.
And my chat was like, let him figure it out. And I was like, oh, this is perfect. So he's in there, he's trying to pull the lever, and he's waiting, and he's this big paladin, like Bladeforge paladin, and then all of a sudden just swings the weapon, the door breaks open, and then he just takes off and is ripping through every door. And I'm like, it's such a cool experience to watch it happen. It was very cool. So I agree.
My favorite was I had 2 new employees at SSG, and when you're first hired in, the first thing we try to do is get you playing the games, because there's no better way to get to know the product than just playing it, right? Yep. So you play it with coworkers. It's a great team building exercise. So I had 2 workers that they had never, ever played DDO before, and I brought them in the low levels of the game. And they for the most part, they were just sort of kind of following behind me. I'm trying to get them out there, but they're pretty much just leaning on me. Well, then I took them through to fight Marguerite, and so they're running away from her, right? And we go through this whole thing. Well, then after that, you go to the scene where you have to talk to her afterwards. Like all the combat's over, you've done everything, and now you have to go. And so we walk in the room, and she's there, and both of them are just like standing there, because we're all sitting like in the same desks at this point, and they're just standing there looking at her. And I'm like, go on, go. You got to talk. The quest says you got to go talk to her, and they're like, no. And they wouldn't do it. And I'm like cajoling them, like, I promise you have to do this. They're like, but she's going to attack us. And it was just one of those things where I'm like, oh, I take these things for granted, these moments of like discovery in this game.
Yeah, that's what makes it difficult for me. People ask me all the time, they're like, oh, what's your quest list? What's your quest list? How do you level up so fast? What quest do you run? And I'm like, the magic dies when you're going for XP instead of doing new quests that you've never played before, where you just have this experience. It's very rare I get to do a quest I've never done, but and so like recently I started doing a study in Sable because somebody said, go do it. And I was like, I will. And I spent an hour figuring out the quest, and it was great. It was how did I never do this one? I've been playing this game for years. I just skipped it every time. It's amazing.
It's actually really easy now compared to the old days to sort of be leveling and be like, wait, I totally forgot the such and such quest.
Yeah, there was the epic rebalance fixed so many of those quests where they're like, they used to be impossibly hard, and now they're like, oh, I can just do it now.
Yeah. Like there's whole packs that I was taking a new friend through it here over the winter, and we were going along, and I realized I was like, oh man, I never got to take her to do the Sentinels, because I actually like Sentinels. I know some people don't like it, but I actually like that story arc. And I was like, oh, I never got to take her to Sentinels, and now we're way too overleveled for her to really appreciate it. But that was just a problem you would never have years ago. Years ago, you were like eking out every single dungeon, right? Now it's like, but there's whole swaths of the story that, like, when you run through, you can almost have a different path every time if you chose.
Yep. No, and there's so many quests now that you can do that. I remember the days of you do Kobold Ringleader 8 times, you do this quest 8 times, and now you just run everything one time and you have a blast.
Yeah. You run everything one time, and then at the same time you're like, oh, I meant to go play this quest over here, and I totally forgot.
Yep. Every time. So you've been playing DDO for a long time. You've been on the team. This is a kind of unrelated, but are you the best on your team? Are you the best DDO player for DDO?
Oh heck no! Oh no! You ever seen that meme where it's a meme of a cat, and there's like a microphone, and it's like, so you're an expert at this, right? And then the next frame is the cat being like, that's me, right? You don't have to be good at a thing to love it intensely.
For sure.
So I am not what I am is probably somebody that keeps my ear to the ground on more other play styles.
For sure.
Because even the ones that I don't do, I still want to know, like, okay, for all those reincarnating people, what's important to them, and which parts are fun and which parts are weird. And so for somebody else that's like a little more, liking to play what they like to play, they don't necessarily have that same kind of being able to put on the different hats of what other people are thinking.
Yeah,
So
that makes sense.
man, who's the best
on your
DDO
team?
player? All right, so how do we want to quantify best? Do we want to quantify it as knows the content the best, or their characters never die, or?
I would say you go into an adventure. You've got your roster of the people that because you're the producer, so you got your pick of the litter, and everyone dies except there's one person carrying all the soul stones, or pulling out the raise scrolls and picking people up, and they're like, oh, thank you.
I feel like I'm having that moment where you ask somebody like who their favorite like kid is,
100%.
and you're like,
yep,
right? Like if I say this name and when I get to the office, they're gonna be like, what?
Exactly. Everyone's watching, and they're just like,
yeah,
it's me. Of course, it's me.
Okay, all right. I'm gonna say it's gonna be. Ooh. Oh, there's some people, it's been so long since I've gotten to engage with the community that I don't actually know what their community-facing name is.
Oh, there you go. True.
Steel Star is definitely high on the list.
Yeah.
But there's some people that I would want, not because they specifically are good, but what they're good at is understanding why the mechanics went the way that they went. And that'd be Torque.
The analysis, yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Everyone's
if I want the analysis,
well, this is why we died. So
yeah, like this is why we died, and this is why this encounter worked the way it worked, and that's because, and then you can start going into the minutia of like how certain scripts are set up, or all the under the hood stuff, or ways that we could change it, or I really value that, at least in terms of what I need for when I'm playing like in a work environment. Dude, I will say, like, the one person I need on my roster is definitely Mr. Tolero. Mr. Tolero is a much better DDO player than I am. Like, way better. Like, if somebody's carrying soul stones, it is definitely Mr. Tolero.
So I only had a couple more questions left, or specific questions. So one of my questions is going to be about content releases, and then you guys ruined my whole question by releasing the producer
schedule thing.
We just know everything is already going to happen.
I know. Here, what if I tell you a thing that wasn't in the producer's letter?
Yes. What is the biggest spoilable thing not on the producer's letter?
All right, the biggest spoilable thing I can tell you that's not in the producer's letter, since I already spoiled the Warforged thing, but people kind of suspected that.
Yeah.
This is a thing that I can spoil safely.
Yep.
I wouldn't call it the biggest thing. It's just a thing I know people will be excited about. I can confirm that there will be dinosaur mounts. So when we do Isle of Dread, there's going to be, you will be able to ride some raptors.
That's what I'm talking about. I needed those dinosaur mounts because I was looking at it and we're looking at the pictures,
right?
And I was like, are we gonna get the raptor mounts? Are we gonna get the triceratops mounts? Are we gonna get the ankylosaurus mounts? Or are we gonna get a horse in a dinosaur costume?
Nope. This is like the full deal, like two-legged. It's not just like, oh, it's a dinosaur, but you can tell it used to be a horse. Like this is a like run around, bite everything.
Oh yeah.
So I this way I can now live out my like Eberron fantasies of like halflings riding dinosaurs, right?
Absolutely, yeah. Of course, you got to be the Boromar clan in real life.
Exactly.
That's cool. Okay, I love this idea. Because I was pretty sure it was coming, because I think what people wanted for a long time is like those non-horse style mounts. Like horses are good. They're classic. They're staple in DDO and Dungeons and Dragons in general. Like horses. If you've ever played D&D, it's like, oh, we're gonna get from point A to point B. Let's go to the stable, get a horse.
You get a horse. And then you intend to take the horse with you into the encounter, and you never do. Or it always gets eaten or lost or something.
Or the Dungeon Master doesn't want to deal with it, so he's just like, yeah, it's at the cart you left outside the cave. No monsters got it, it's fine.
Yeah, I think in my tabletop career, I have only twice gotten to play in a session where, and I think I've run one session where we kept the horses deliberately, and we even had the whole encounter was all about the fact that we figured out, okay, if horses have run speed, whatever. So the whole encounter was them chasing somebody down who was on a horse, and we just went through the whole thing. Like, I'm fighting on the horse, I'm riding the horse, like. But many, many other times it's, oh, you tied your horsies up and you come back and they're gone.
Yep. Oh no, not the horses. That's awesome. I'm really excited about that. Dinosaur mounts, and then we'll get even more mounts. I'm just stoked. Because as a DDO player and also a Lotro player, there's a button in Lord of the Rings called Collections, and it freezes your computer because there's too many mounts to load. Yeah. And every time I'm just staring out the window, just being like, I want them in DDO. So many mounts. But they're coming.
So many mounts. But yes, we're getting there. It is quite a feat to make a mount. We don't make them lightly because it takes a lot of effort to make them. You would be very surprised. You would think it would just be like, woo, it's just like making a little cosmetic arm. There's so much stuff that has to get hooked up, and then you're having to do it across all the different, halflings are this size, and the way that their bones the rig sits is
Yep.
different than the way the human sits, and you have to make sure that they're not going to get all. It's
Yeah.
really funny. Some of the errors that happen when you don't do that stuff right is you can have. It's not just like, oh, it's clipping. I mean, it's things like, oh, the person's head is like falling off like the thing. Like,
Yeah.
it's all warped out and the geometry has gone crazy, and it's really bad. So it takes a lot of effort to hook that stuff up. But yes, we wanted to have mounts that aren't just I'm a four-legged horse.
Yes. I didn't remember when the when Hardcore 4 was happening, there was like the 4 on the side of the mount that we got, but because of the way that they're actually written, it reflects the image on both sides. So the 4 is backwards, so it looks like a 6. And so they had to just get that, scrub that off of there. So yeah, it's complicated, but I'm stoked. I think it's gonna be awesome.
I'm excited.
Yeah, well, those are all the questions I had directly for you.
Sure.
Do you guys have any more time? If you either want to take some questions from chat or some kind of ad hoc questions.
Yeah, I basically look to Cordovan to see if he's like falling asleep at the keyboard there, or I mean, I have more time. So if you all are awake, I know some people are in different time zones and stuff. So I know some folks couldn't make it earlier because they're already asleep. Like, I'm sorry, Belgium. Like, so I get it.
Yeah, there's quite a few Europeans out there that have not had the opportunity to go to sleep yet because they're all waiting patiently for this whole thing. And I said there's going to be a YouTube video tomorrow, but they're like,
that's not the same as being there, right?
It's not the same as being there, exactly.
Yeah. What we'll have to do is, the nice thing is the European time is more like during the workday time. So what we'll have to do is another visit when it's like prime, like everybody in the European territories would be awake. So yeah, that would be fun.
I remember that, I know there was, I guess in the past, it's kind of rough for DDO because there used to be European servers for DDO, and now there's obviously not. They're all just in North America. Even the European servers in Lord of the Rings they're still in North America. They just are French or German, right? So I know.
Yeah, they've gone back and forth over time. Sometimes we've put them overseas. Sometimes we've had them here. It's varied.
Yeah.
But yes, they're still run all by us.
Is there anything that in particular, so you guys feel free to ask some questions in chat. We'll do a Q&A here. Is there anything in particular that you either have wanted to say, I guess, about the DDO community that you maybe didn't get to say during this interview? Because I know that obviously you must be really excited to step in this role and kind of talk about the game. And I assume people are probably going to see more of you at this point.
Yeah, that's the goal. I'll warn you, it'll be a little slow at first because I obviously still have to ramp up and get everything going, get in the saddle, as it were. And I still have to train my backfill, which takes, some time. It takes time to take like all of what's in my brain and, download it into another human in terms of like the catalog and store stuff and web stuff and all that jazz. So that means there's going to be a little bit of a slow start here. But once that sort of transitional phase has passed, then I'm going to be able to get back to doing things like being in the forums regular again.
Yeah.
Engaging with the different fan sites. Now, we've got things like a Discord. Like there's a Discord I could go visit people in.
Yeah, Discord's great, by the way. You should definitely jump into it. It's fun.
Yeah. I didn't want to jump into the Discord yet because I knew it'd be a case where I'd jump in and then you'd just see me quiet all the time. So I was like, once I go into the Discord, I want it to be in a place where I'm like, I have those cycles to be like, hey, everybody.
Yeah. That, or also the possibility where you start typing a lot and people are like, why is Tolero typing a lot into chat all of a sudden? This is very interesting.
Yeah.
Putting the pieces together.
But yeah, so things like that I'm really excited about doing. It's also just been nice to see everybody. Like there's this whole feeling of getting to see players that, you see their handles and it's been the same handles they've used all along. And you're thinking like, wow, like this is somebody that I don't want to say you've grown up with because, we were in our 20s when we started, but still it's like you're like going through like decade or more of your life with like this community of people. And like, there's just something very comforting about that. Like going through the pandemic, I know you all don't know that I was there, but just being around DDO people through that was just really, really incredible. Because you've had this really intense isolation, but when you were in the game with everybody else, you knew you were talking with people that liked the same thing that you liked.
Yeah.
Quests that they've been around for like a long time like you have, and like you can like be talking about different stuff that you remember and this and that, reminisce together, and just it made it way less isolating in a way that was harder to accomplish in other things. Like, you know, a lot of friends and family started to do like video calls and all that jazz, and
Which
it
is nice
wasn't
for a
the
bit,
same.
but it's not
Yeah,
the
exactly.
same.
It was like, oh, I get to see you, but there's just something really powerfully different about being together with people in DDO. It was just so nice. I just really, I just can't speak highly enough of the community. You know, like, it's just so good.
All right, so we're gonna hit some. I got some questions. They can be easy rapid fire. So if you literally have nothing to say about it, that's perfectly good. But there's just a lot of them that have been popping up. So
Okay.
DDO, houses. People want to customize things. We got boats. We can't really customize, and we got no houses. So
We've talked about houses. I don't have house announcements, but we've talked about it. The hardest thing was like we know people like one of the big things you like about your boat is as you build out your boat, you're getting like cool character buffs, right?
Yeah, you get cool stuff. Yeah.
You get cool stuff, and so that part is cool. But then we know the part that's not so cool is when you're moving around in your deck and you're like, oh god, which room did we put the bank in? I forget, right? That part's kind of frustrating. And then it's the amount of effort it takes for us to build those out is like, okay, do you want a dungeon or a new piece of your airship? Right? So it's like I don't like having it's like I don't like having to make that choice. I would much rather be in a place where we could just like be minting out cool stuff for people to like arrange however they want, right? And we talked about like
so the answer is overtime.
Yeah. And we talked about what's the difference, you know, right now everybody builds the ships communally. Well, what's it look like when you're building just like a house for yourself by yourself? Is that as enticing? Is the fact that you're doing it with your friends better or not? Like there's lots to think through there. But yeah, we've talked about like, do we want to do some houses? So it's still like primordial back of our minds.
So with the classes Monk, Druid, and Warlock becoming free to play, previously there was a thing where like selling iconic characters was meant to be on like mostly free to play classes, because then you don't have to deal with the hurdle of like you buy the Azamar Favored Soul, but you don't own Favored Soul, so could you play it? And it would kind of sidestep that whole thing. Could we expect to see maybe iconics in the future of that? Of like those classes? Or are they still like...
It's funny because the goal of the iconics wasn't actually that. And so it's interesting to hear that that's people's approach, because the original goal of the iconics was we wanted a way for, and you know, this has been years ago, right? This is like circa what, like Shadowfell, 2013 maybe. We wanted a way for people to not have to start at level 1. Like we knew we were coming out with Shadowfell content, because back then we weren't as good about doing that sort of low level, high level split like we do now. We were like, well, if we want people to come for this content, if they're not already level, whatever they need to be, and people don't want to like spend time at the low levels, what if we just boost them up to 15? Will that help? And that's sort of what the iconics were about, was about giving you a character that was kind of built out. And then we're like, well, what if we put some cosmetics on to make it feel a little special? And so that was sort of the purpose of it. And then over time it became like, well, you know, people seem to like them okay. What if we keep doing them? And so we were adding them as this sort of, we're doing ASMR and then we'll do ASMR iconic. We'll do a shifter and then a shifter iconic. And that was kind of, right?
Just 2 for 1.
Exactly. So we were talking about, we're like, okay, do people like the iconics because they're level 15, or do they just like the fact that they're a different build option? Or do they like the fact that it comes with the cosmetics? Or like there's like different things to like about them. And we're like, how important is it that they be level 15? If we came out with like a level 1 iconic, is that just as appealing as long as it has like a cool progression?
I mean, I think that would be very cool.
Right?
Level 1 iconics is probably like the thing when people talk about iconics the most. They're like, I want to make iconics, but I like playing the low levels, and I can't.
Exactly, yeah. You have to get
but
to
you
do
can't
like
on hardcore,
weird...
and it's the greatest. So I play my iconics on hardcore because it's really fun, because you're like, I'm playing a Sun Elf, but I'm in the harbor. It's great.
Yeah. So yeah, that was my thing about iconics, is like the goal of them was different than the way that people have ended up engaging with them. And so I think there's room for us to keep thinking through how they work.
Okay, that makes sense. Speaking of iconics, tabaxi iconic, what is it?
I can't tell you that yet.
I just figured I'd ask. I'm right here.
I know. I did see somebody ask, though. Somebody, I think it was in the forums, they were like, there were 2 different discussions. One was like Rakshasas, and the other one was a different one. Specifically on Rakshasa. They were like, is tabaxi just going to be a Rakshasa? And I'm like, well, no, because it's not going to have like the backwards hand thing.
First, the backwards hands, no.
Right? No backwards hands. But second off, it is going to be like an actual like, be able to adjust parts of the face, be able to adjust the colors, be able to adjust the patterns. You're not just going to be like, oh, it's the tiger.
That was a big sticking point. I'm like, patterns, you got to be able to choose your cat color, because what if Want to be a
So we
leopard or
want
a
you,
cheetah?
right? Yeah. So we want you to be able to customize the tabaxi. It's not just going to be like everybody's a tiger because we just stole the Rakshasa rig. Like we did take the effort to make a tabaxi. Like it's really cool. We got to see the review of them this week. Like we're in that phase where you're sort of looking at what the artists have made and you're deciding things like, do we need a shadow on the way the nose connects with the face here, and stuff like that.
Yeah, the fine details.
Yeah, the fine details, and it's looking really cool. I'm really excited about them.
All right, so next one. We talked earlier about things that get people jazzed to start playing for a little bit, and I know one thing that has been done in the past is the level 10 character thing.
The level 10 character boost,
Veteran
yeah.
3. Personally, I've never really used it, but I know some people that get excited about it. Is that something you guys see like success when people use it, or like is there a possibility of bringing that to a more? Is that going to stay like just a feature of when there's an event going on? You can do this.
So right now we were kind of looking at when do we want to do it, right? I'm sort of the gatekeeper of the level 10 boost personally.
Oh, okay.
Even before being the producer, Tolero was the one being like, is it time for the level 10 boost? And sort of looking at the timing of where it would make the most sense to do it and doing a little experimentation. I actually wanted to run it a little more often than what we've done. It's been pretty rare right now, and I wanted to do it a little bit more frequently. But so in this role, I can definitely be talking to the person who comes in behind me about the fact that, like, hey, level 10 boost, I think people like it. When you talk about, say, to me, the level 10 boost is an air quote fingers small one.
Yeah.
Because the effort for me to flip it on and off is easy. It's just the timing that has to be done carefully.
Right.
But for me, that to me is a really good one to do. I'd like to increase the frequency of when it happens because it's just really, it's another one of those, if you hear it, you understand what it means. You're like, yeah, I can skip some levels. Cool. Really easy for people to conceptualize. And so for people, especially the people who have been kind of gone for a while, I will say that, like, when you're coming back, you're doing a build, like, let's say you take a break for a while, you come in. It doesn't matter how well you knew that character. If you've taken any kind of a long break, you come back into that character and you're like, oh my god, what was I doing with this?
I don't know
how
what
do I play this again?
What are these items?
Why were my hot bars even set this way? I don't even know.
Yep.
So being able to sort of jump 10 levels deep and kind of build some stuff out instead of gradually playing to build those things that you're like, okay, I'm going to get kind of a workable character at a workable point in the gameplay cycle. At level 10, like, you're starting to hit content that's like pretty intense and fun, and you're not just playing like the really low sort of starter stuff. At this, like, level 10 is where you're like, I know DDO at this point, and I know how to play it, and I can handle the stories and the puzzles it's going to throw at me. And so being able to, like, be level 10 and kind of get yourself situated so that you can start getting back in the groove, like, I totally get why people find level 10 valuable.
Speaking of cosmetic things, a lot of people like small cosmetic changes to their characters. Cloaks were a big one for helping people out, but people want other stuff, specifically like things that other people can recognize. And right now, the only thing we have are those little loopies that go next to your name when you, like, reincarnate. Titling systems, other visual effects. Have you guys thought about these types of things, or not so much?
These are things we have thought about. What we've been thinking about is, how tough is it to do? Like, the titling system, we've visited at least 2 or 3 times in my DDO lifetime. And each time it's been... sometimes we get as close as, like, we have the system hooked up, and then you go in and there's silly things like, oh no, one person changed their title and it changed it for the whole server, and just, like, it's always
would be bad. Yeah.
Or oh, we have the titles hooked up, but it's like slamming the server with messages and it's knocking everything over, so let's not do that. And so it's something we keep wanting to, like, come back to, and we just have to look at the implementation side of it.
Yeah.
But yeah, character customization is, I feel like, an area where DDO, like, has a lot of room to grow.
Yeah.
Like, getting the cloaks, getting the mounts, that's been, like, so huge. Like, even now I look at, like, my character, what I can do with it visually. I'm, like, riding, like, a flame mount, and I've got my, like, ravenloft, like, sort of vampire hunter hat, and then I found, like, the cool People in the Borderlands cloak, and all that stuff was sort of meant to go as a set separately, but then I happened to put them together on this one character, and I was like, oh, it looks pretty cool. And that's just a thing that I never used to really get. Like, 2006 DDO, you're like, okay, I got this random breastplate, what do I think of it?
That's it. Yeah, there's no cosmetic system back in the day, but...
Or, like, the mirror, like, now being able to take the mirror, like, it used to be, like, I would find, like, there's this one, we call them jumpsuits. So you know how, like, some of your armor is, like sort of more flush to you and some of it's 3D?
Yeah.
The flush to you part's what we call the jumpsuit. There's this one jumpsuit that I just love, and I have always loved. It's like black and white, and it has some of like that, like kind of Emerald kind of swirls on it. You see it on some of the NPCs sometimes, but
Yep, I've
once in
seen
a
it
while,
before.
you get it in random
shown
loot,
it.
right?
Yep.
And so back in the day, when I first got that on, I don't even know what it was, but it was just like maybe some level 8 level stuff. And I got that thing, and I was like, oh my god, I love the way this looks, but it's on a completely trash piece of loot that I'm never going to use on my bard. And I was like, ugh. And so then when we were able to do things like the mirrors as a concept, I was like, oh, thank God.
Yeah, I think that's definitely true, where you find like a lot of random loot. My favorite thing is when somebody, because people like cosmetics, I'm just streaming and somebody's like, oh, that looks really cool. What is that? And I click on my inventory and I'm like, oh, it's a +2 deflecting breastplate of acid resistance.
Yeah.
Sorry. I would love to tell you where to get this, but
yeah, it's just gotta go hunt.
So another question that's popping up here. So because you used to do a lot of like, e-commerce marketing sort of stuff, right? I know people in a lot of other video games, they buy a lot of cosmetics. So there's like cosmetics you can buy. In fact, in Lord of the Rings Online, there's that Lalia's Market where they have all the cloaks and they're all on display and you can see them all and they're all so beautiful. But DDO has like so many cool cosmetics that are like right there that just don't show up in the store. And the easiest example is the footprints from Hardcore. Very popular item. People want to compete for it, but there's no other way to get them. So not even like the bloody footprints. There's not like a blue one in the store that you could just buy for like X amount of points and put it on. Have you guys like what's the deal with like the cosmetics and how you guys put them in the store? Specifically, even if you want to reference like those footprints, that's something that people want all the time. All the time.
So the trick of cosmetics is that the more of them you have, the less important they each become.
Right.
And so you reach a point where you'll put in it takes the same amount of work to make, say, let me think of a good example. Let's say that I make, okay, let's take mounts, right? Let's pick mounts because that's a super easy one. If I have 10 different mounts, right? It took me the same amount of effort to make each of those mounts. There's no replication savings. Like we don't have an actual way to be like, oh, well, all it was just copy pasting such and such. It's never that simple, right? It's true of almost all cosmetics. There's an artist having to go in and do a bunch of rigmarole. And they have to do it every single time. But so the first suite of them that you come out with, people are like, oh, cool, right? And then you add one more and they're like, oh, that's pretty cool. Get that one too. And then by the 20th one you're in, they're like, do I like that one or not? I don't know. Does that go with my vibe right now? Yeah, I think I can skip that. Like you reach a point where people feel they can skip them. So then you've still done the same amount of work to make them, but you're getting fewer and fewer and fewer buyers because each person is getting their 1 or 2 or 3 compared to when it first came out. Everybody was getting it because it was rare, right? Like the first few cloaks are like, oh my god, I have to pick a cloak. I got a cloak before. 200 cloaks in, you're going to be like, do I need the blue one? I don't know. And so then it gets tricky with things like hardcore or other things like that where the prestige type cosmetic, everybody's all about those footprints, right? But how about them are they going to be when everybody has them? I don't know. With the glowy eyes, for example, glowy eyes has been consistently popular. Like people do tend to like the glowy eyes, and they even like certain colors of the glowy eyes, right? And it's so tricky to discover what that new thing is that everybody's going to want, because you have to basically hit that every time you do it, because you can't just be like, oh, this time I happened to make the coolest cloak and now everybody wants that one cloak. Like you have to try to hit that every single time. And it's challenging because people have so many different looks.
Yeah.
Like if you were making really customized characters, like it'd be different if it was very efficient to just sort of mint out a whole bunch of them, but it's not, at least not with technology today. Maybe 20 years from now when I'm like ready to retire or whatever, it'll be like, and now we have AIs. It's just mental. I don't think we're going to be there anytime even in my lifetime, but that's the kind of effort it would take to make that prospect easier to do, because each individual cosmetic takes the exact same effort for the artist, for the hooking up in the back end, for hooking up all the little doodad or billing tokens and stuff that we use, like all that stuff. It's challenging. Like
for sure.
I feel like almost like that somehow, even though we're a digital product, right? Like we're pixels in space. Yep. Somehow the fashion industry has figured out how to do this in a way with physical items that I am challenged to do with digital items, and it's just wild to me.
It is. Yeah, I don't know.
They
Go
do
ahead.
like, green season shirt this season. Oh, nobody liked it. Whatever, we'll do blue next time. And it's like no big deal to them somehow. I'm like,
Yeah.
how are we doing this?
Just rotate that sail. It's the next
Right?
thing. I know that specifically there's a lot of people that thought about the footprints as mostly just like a tool to help people move around, where like one of the issues as well is getting lost in dungeons. And like there's the Bigby's hands that are in the store you can buy to like lead people through dungeons and things. But as like a learning tool, I definitely know there's a lot of people that feel kind of bitter about I got to spend my DDO points to help new players play.
Yeah,
Like that
yeah.
should just be a feature to like place a dungeon marker, which in modern dungeon you can play any video game and they all have that feature.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, I've been looking at Bigby's. One of my last I have pet projects from the commerce thing where I had little hit lists of like, okay, someday I'm going to get around to blah. And Bigby's was on my list. Like, I don't think that the pricing of the Bigby's is right.
I think people would love to just
another
see it
one
as
is
like a feature in game, or like Bigby's
yeah,
hands are
yeah,
like you buy it and then it's just a thing you activate with a cooldown.
yeah. Or another one is I feel like the Omni spell dusts are like you don't get enough of them. Like I think it's only like 50 in the
It's
stack,
50
and
per
it's
pack,
like
yeah.
like it needs to be way more dust.
Yeah.
There's just little things like that. The good news is this producer will still have the ability to be like, hey, yo, commerce person, let's see if we can do something about this thing from my old pet peeve list. But
Yeah. Got a finger in every pie. You're kind of like
yeah.
working around that. Everybody always wants more customization options. I mean, especially when it comes to character creation. Dungeons and Dragons Online is obviously a very old game. So like your human options are like 2006 hair and bald.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
there's more stuff that can be done for that. I just want more Warforged colors.
I love Warforged. Like
they're
I'm all like,
greatest.
so when are we gonna get like Warforged horses? Because I've got like my Warforged peacock and
I would love to ride an
like,
Iron Defender. I think that's
right?
good. I remember when I did before I got to chat with Steel Star before the release of Feywild, and I was like, hey, so obviously there's going to be unicorns. It's Feywild, so robot unicorn attack. We're going to have a robot unicorn, and it's going to play always as you ride it around, right? And he's like, yeah. So, this is just an easy question. If there was something that you could just snap your fingers and magic it into the game, what's like a wish list item that like this might be like too big to even like this would take 10 years of work. So if you could just have it done.
Does it have to be a fun thing, or does it have to be a
No, it can be even like a work thing where it's like I just would like an easier sorting system. I don't know, whatever it is.
I have somebody like so all right, here's my snap a finger wish list.
Yep.
There are weird little down cycles when you're a producer because you go through, you do all the processes, get everything working, and then there'll be these weird little down cycles. And what I'd love to be able to snap my fingers and do is during those weird little down cycles, be able to take on some of those like they're the small kind of pet peevy things that need fixed or that we're like, oh, we're never going to have time to focus on getting around to the such and such. And then I would just be able to go and like fill those little gaps, like those little silly things where it's like, why does this dungeon do this? All we need to do is this is not endgame content anymore. Just pull this little widget out and then I'll like me to be able to just go and hit those while everybody else is making the new stuff and fixing the important things. I'm just going in and being able to like clear up the stuff that I would like. The snap of the finger would give me the knowledge of all the different tool sets that you need to do those kinds of things.
Yeah, exactly. It's like I would love to just fix this. It would just take me 30 hours to learn how to do this easily for this thing, and that also involves someone else's time. And
yeah. Like it's like what could I just like go through and like clean up some slush here? Where it's not like they're not problems that are like so big that you would like want to prioritize them above the way more important stuff, but you're still like, do we really have to like keep not fixing this thing?
Yeah,
like, I'd love to be able to just snap the fingers, boom, pounce.
Yeah, prioritization sucks because you can see the same complaint over and over, and you're like, I want to fix it.
Yep.
But this other thing is like more important, and it just it's kind of hard.
Yeah.
I know that a feature that quite a lot of people have been thinking about is like storage, inventory space. It's always a problem. End of the year in table as future, not Q4 but future. Character bank changes. Do you have any details you can share about that single line on that thing?
Yeah. So I think people saw a preview of it. There were some problems with it, so we had to roll it back. But the idea is that we're going to try to finish that feature up and bring it out. So Zerka was looking at it because there's a lot of engineering involved with the banking system. And ideally, what we'll have is I don't know if we can get this part to work. This is honestly one of the hangups. We want to be able to set it to where you can like have like different like sorting for yourself, or if you're like, okay, this tab is for my, I don't know, maybe I want to pile my think of a thing that you want to organize in your inventory, and the idea would be that you could sort of like visually sort it in a better way. That it'll have search in it. That it's going to behave more like the list format that you see in the shared bank, but with extra things.
Yeah, I'm always, again, jealous of the Lord of the Rings bank.
Yeah,
they
and
have
literally,
100
that's literally
spaces.
what we're looking at, right?
Yeah, because they have like 200 spaces in it, but it has like 20 tabs. So
it has tabs.
so you just put the things in the tabs. You can rename your tabs and color code them, and I'm like, oh, it's so nice.
It's literally what we've been looking at to see how can we pull that off here, or something at least reminiscent of it. Yeah. And so that's the holdup, is like getting that to work properly.
Isn't it such a shame you can't just like copy? Paste.
I know, right?
Done. Enter key. It's over.
They're so similar in so many ways, and then so different in important ones, where you're just like, I can't just, because we do try to find efficiencies where we're like, you know what, this thing that we're working on, it just makes sense in both places. So both places, but you always have to do like the Lotro or the DDO specific version of that under the hood. Yeah. Because there are just enough differences that you can't just like, oh, we did it in both places, and it's fine. There's always some massaging that you have to do.
Yeah. I think people get really excited about that, because obviously, everyone wants infinite amounts of storage space. We all want more storage space, because my house isn't big enough and I need to put more stuff in. But just being able to organize it is so much nicer.
I'm such a hoarder. Like, I have items in my inventory that just have expressly sentimental value, and I look at this item and I'm like, oh, that, I don't know. Let me think of a good one.
Do you have a specific example? Because I was actually digging through a character, I don't know, that I made 10-ish years ago, and just like literally yesterday, and I found all sorts of weird ancient items. I'm like, whoa, an old anniversary box and stuff.
Yep, like old anniversary cakes. Yeah, the cards, the cakes. I even have like some of my first like festival coins, where I know that like this festival coin came from like 2006, and I'm like, oh, I can never spend it because it's the 2006 one. Or another one I found the other day was back in the day before I was hired, when I was running player events. They had one of the admins go on, and I got an item. It's just cosmetic. It's just a little bitty wand. It has sparkles. It doesn't do anything. It's called the Wayfinder Scepter.
Yeah.
It doesn't do anything. But that little sucker is in my inventory, and I was like, there it is. There's my wand from June of 2006. So I just keep collecting the first ofs, my first this, my first that, and they all keep getting stashed in my ever-bloating inventory.
Yep. It's okay. We'll have more soon, so it's all good. It's always the solution, I feel like. It's just like, oh, I should sort this better. Or I buy more.
Because that was the big thing, is like the way that the character bank right now is set up is it's actually quite resource expensive, and that was one of the things stopping us from adding even more. In terms of storage, was each of those chunks of storage that we were giving you was really expensive.
Oh, because the bank itself was like poorly optimized, that even if you wanted to add more, it would just brick character logins and stuff.
Yep. So, and that's part of the motivation to get it refreshed now, is in addition to it being like, yay, more storage for everybody. It's like, well, yeah, because like we couldn't give you more storage because it wasn't performant. Now it would be. So that is very exciting.
That, and also, there's like House Kundarak, where you have to earn the favor every life to get your bank, but then people put their stuff in their TR cache, then they got to earn the favor again to put it back in, and it's just, all this stuff back and forth. I know a question that does come up fairly regularly is that we talked about before how some people are like nervous about playing with other players, and it kind of like stresses them out. And also some people just don't have, they don't have any friends, or they have friends, they're just not on right now. People are on vacation, they're doing stuff. Yep. So the solo play game is a pretty big part of DDO. Have you guys considered more like options for, because we get raids coming out, and I love them. The new raid that's coming out is super sick. Yeah. But then there's like all the people in the back that are like, I don't want to do it. What about me? Are you guys thinking about like challenging solo content or things that would be more interesting in that nature?
I think about solo content a lot because I spend a lot of time soloing. So that's the predominant way I play, because when number one, since I'm not that good, I always feel like I'd be like dragging a party down. So I'm like, if I just torture myself, then no one else has to suffer. But, so I like taking my guys through solo. So for me, it's part of it is there's some chunks of the game, especially the older chunks, where it was designed specifically around a party, and in some places it's really punishing, and it really wanted you to.
Yeah.
We've tried to clean some of those up over the years, but there's more that can be done. I'm always stumbling into some mechanic where like, here's another dungeon where it unnecessarily needs 2 levers. And yeah, you can kind of do it with a hireling, but there's a couple of them, even the hireling's not good enough. Like there was one quest in, it's been a long time since I've run it. You basically had to go, the dungeon was designed for a team of 2 to split up. One go in one direction, one go the other. I think there was a vampire at the end of it, but it's really designed for a split.
Oh, we're coming back to Necro 1 again.
It might be Necro 1. Well, it's the one where there's like the green sort of wall. There's a screen wall, and what I figured out was that I was physically capable of doing the run in both wings. The only thing that was stopping me, the only thing that stops me is this artificial sort of gating, where it was like if I didn't have this gating, I totally could have pulled this off on my own. But the reason that gating exists is to make you be a split team.
Exactly.
And I'm like, is that really necessary? Is that really? No, it's not. So I want to clean some of that stuff up because it makes it hard to get a true assessment of what it's like to be a solo player if there's weird old mechanics lingering around that are artificially kind of changing the experience. But now we have enough content you can kind of get around those. So for me, it's like, if I'm playing solo, like what are the things that, like for me, I actually enjoy solo play quite a bit.
Yep.
Because it's the one time I get to actually enjoy the story of a dungeon when I'm playing with like other people or with friends. We're just sort of like plowing through and you get to read like 2 seconds of whatever the NPC is saying, or the dungeon master is talking, but your friend is like trying to like communicate with you about where they want you standing or whatever.
Yeah.
And so when I'm playing solo, the most enjoyable part about it is getting to actually enjoy and experience the story.
Yeah.
So I don't know if other people like that, but that's what I find 100%. Really enjoyable about
Whenever
solo.
a new quest comes out, I'm usually like, okay, guys, no group today. I'm just going to do the quest slowly. So like when Saltmarsh came out, I just spent like 8 hours in Saltmarsh reading everything, finding every secret door, talking to all the NPCs. It was good.
Yep. There was dungeons that I had run where I'd run them plenty of times in groups and then come back and run them solo one night and been like, oh, it's been like 5 years and I only just now understand what this NPC is talking about.
Yeah, because you always just ran the quest and somebody else talked to the guy. And
yeah,
like,
somebody else talked to him and you're like, I don't know what they told us. We have to keep going. I don't know. Like one of my favorite ones right now to go through is White Plume. I really like going through White Plume.
Yeah,
I just find that super fun.
That's a fantastic quest. I think people like just the general because it comes from the adventure pack, like the classic. And then also, it's great. It's just such a good adventure.
Yeah.
I love the giant crab boss.
And I like, the giant crab boss is cool. I like the loot. Like, I like everything about it. Like, it's my favorite right now. My flavor of the week, as it were.
I know that, just keep on the same topic of solo play. Some people have been playing DDO for a long time, and they find the game not so much that it isn't challenging, it's that they're so used to it and they know how to do it that the game doesn't provide the same level of challenge that they had before. And they don't really group a whole lot. So the only way they get more challenge is they click the Reaper button, which is fun because it adds challenge, but it auto-scales it for many players, which is usually enough for some people, but also slows down the gameplay because it prevents you from basically healing yourself. You just gotta sit there for like an hour in each quest.
Yeah.
Now,
it's a really cool setting when you're grouping. Like, it definitely changes your play dynamic. But I don't think when we, it was actually I don't want to say it was like Sev's baby, but like Sev was very instrumental in bringing that one out.
Yeah.
And one of the things that never really came up in conversation was like, what's it like to do Reaper solo? Right? We always think of, okay, what's it? Because we know a lot of people group in DDO or duo, right? There's duos or triples, but we never specifically sat down and go, what's like when you solo? Is it fun when you solo? Right? So I think that's a thing we could always come back and look a little closer at. Like me, I'm only hitting like a ripple 2.
Yeah. Because like in Lord of the Rings Online, they had that extra deadly difficulty server, and the difficulty is set up. I don't know if you know this. They basically stole Reaper. They literally stole the whole idea. Yeah. There's like special mods on the landscape and different monsters and stuff, and the eyes that are basically like the Reapers.
Well, like we totally like the Lotro team, right? Because remember, as a commerce person, I was sort of pulling double duty with games, and we totally talked about the fact that we're like, hey, one of the really cool strengths of DDO, this is what I forgot to mention earlier, is the fact that you really can kind of hyper tune your difficulty. It's kind of like when you go in and play like, you know, like Doom or something, and be like, okay, do you want nightmare mode or do you want casual mode? And so we have this nice striation of like, how tough do I want it? Like, there's plenty of nights you go in and you're like, yeah, we're gonna take, you know, Reaper 3, and it's like, well, no, maybe we're just gonna do Reaper 1, or well, maybe we're only good enough for like Elite. And you
Yeah.
just tune it. Like you try it, and if it's like, that's a little too hard, you don't have to go from, oh, it's too hard down to, it's too easy. Like there's really some gradation where you can
Yep.
kind of put yourself where you want to be. And like that's so valuable. And so we talked about that, and we're like, man, I wish we could do something like that in Lord of the Rings. Because like for some people, that's like, it's too easy for me. It's like,
Yep.
how do we make it more challenging without everybody? I said, well, in DDO, we do that by giving you, difficulty gradation.
Yep.
So we talked about, how it's different because with them, it's more of an open landscape than what we have, right? A lot of DDO content is about going into instances. And so we were like, well, that makes it really easy to control difficulty because everybody's agreeing when they go into this encounter that we're all doing it on X difficulty. What happens when I'm walking through, the open world here, and I'm like, well, okay, when is the point at which I make the decision to make it harder or not?
Yep. No, 100%. And I played it when it came out, and it was the greatest. I put it onto the Deadly Six, and me and a buddy ran through it, and every monster kills you in like 2 hits, but we played crowd control classes, we kited a lot, we did teams, and then all of a sudden, there's an extra monster, one more monster pull is like, fire the alarms, we're going to die, we got to figure this out. And it was a fantastic time. And it was really fun to struggle bust through because we could heal ourselves, because there's no healing penalty in Lord of the Rings.
Right.
So I just... Yeah, people are going off in chat right now. And just like a lot of people are like, I want to play the harder thing. I just hate that I can't heal myself. So I don't mind dying in 1 hit. That's fine. Just.
Do you want to hear a really funny e-commerce story about Reaper mode?
Yeah, I'd love to.
So the first time we went to do it, we were having really big deliberations about hardcore, and we were like, ooh, what about the store? Can somebody just like go through the store and play it like Reaper 10? And I was like, you know what? I'm going to try it. So I went in the game, I'm like, Reaper 10, I'm going to take the dumbest build I can build, and I'm buying every single e-store thing that could possibly help a person and make them awesome, best healing potion, best tome, best whatever, right? Infinite money at the problem, because I'm the manager of the store and I can just do that for myself. So I build out this character, and I step in, I'm like, Reaper 10, here we go, okay, all right. And I stepped into like Haberdasher, right?
Yep.
I'm like, I'm going to pick
basic quest.
Basic quest, right? Let's go fight some scorpions. I walk in the dungeon, I walk downstairs. I'm like, okay, scorpion, we're going to pick. And it killed me so fast.
Yep.
And I was like, that's okay. I'm just going to pick. And I was like, okay, clearly this is very difficult.
Yep.
So I tried to like e-store my way through it, and I couldn't do it. Like in some cases in DDO, there is just no substituting skill.
Yeah, that's awesome. I still remember when Reaper mode first came out, and we were like, let's try to do every quest on Reaper 10. And you can't do any of them because because every monster was taking 1 damage from everything in the harbor, and it was, oh man, it was great. It was such a fun adventure. But yeah, there's definitely a lot of scenarios where you can buy 100 cakes, you're still not going to win, but
you're still not going to do it.
Thank you for supporting DDO, Hey,
basically,
buy those cakes.
Yeah, people are always anxious about like, oh, what about start? I'm like, trust me. Those of us who suck at DDO, it doesn't matter how much store I have. Like, I have infinite store because I work here, and I still can't fight certain dungeons, right? Like, Strahd still just mops the floor with me, right?
Yeah.
Like, it's just how it is. You just have to know how to play the game. Or in some cases, I totally get what I need to be doing. I'm just not good at doing it.
Yeah. You're like, come on, fingers, go. I'm watching what I want to happen.
Go.
I'm imagining
just trigger this ability when I'm facing this up. Nope. See, that's like all my builds are like all passives, right? Because like I totally get the value of activated abilities, but I'm just never like able to like be facing the right way or time at the right time. So I'm always just like, no, passive build as much as possible. I don't want to have to like hit anybody.
Yep, everything is passive, and then just hit the guy. Click it, hit the monsters, and we're good. That's my favorite type of quest. Hit the monsters.
Hit the monsters.
Yeah. Oh, another thing I did want to ask about, because there is the we got Frogo. People love Frogo. He's great. He's a super helpful friend. And we have rogue hirelings in epics that you can just like buy, and they're the greatest. Let you bypass traps and stuff.
Yep.
So like, do you think maybe we'd ever see rogue hirelings, but like in the vendors that you see all around? As opposed to just like, because there's none in 1 to 20. They're in epics, so we can clearly buy them with platinum, but you can't buy them in low levels.
That's probably something we could look at. Because like the purpose of the hirelings is literally just to like help you along. Like things like Frogo are more about the fact that Frogo looks cool.
He looks great.
Like,
I love Frogo.
Yeah, right? Everybody loves Frogo, right?
That's why
like,
we had that petition where 300 people signed it. We need bullywugs today, which is also coming up later.
oh, we all went back and forth about like, we're like, if we bring the bullywugs in, someday we're gonna have to make playable bullywugs, right? Like, we're all emotionally prepared for this future of ours. Someday we're gonna have to make the frog people.
Yep. I literally just finished playing Chrono Trigger before you guys like debuted the Frogo, and I was like, yeah.
I mean, I loved my EverQuest Froglock, right? Like, I loved it when they would be doing combat, they do this cute little backflip thing. It was like super cool. I was like, oh, I love that. And when you would run, instead of like running like a normal person, you would like hop. And I just loved it. They would look kind of like rainforest frogs.
Yeah.
So when we were making Frogo, it was just like, I could be on board if somebody came to me and said, you know what, Amanda, I think we should, one of our next playable races here in the next few years could be the Froglock. I was like, you know what? I could see it. But we went tabaxi instead because I was like, you know what? Let's go with tabaxi.
Oh, tabaxi is a good option.
Yeah.
Cat people are in like every video game, so it's too long. 16 years for DDO, too long. Yeah, I know there's definitely some people. The big questions, obviously, server merges, crossplay, LFM. I don't think you guys have anything to announce about that or even talk about, but
yeah, I don't have anything there other than just like that's like kind of the. I don't want to say it's a frustrating thing, and it's only frustrating in the sense of like passion and excitement, which is when you see players talk about a thing, and you're like, yes, we have absolutely had that on our minds as well, but I don't have a thing to tell you about what we're doing with it. But it's like, there's so many things. You're like, have you thought about this? Have you thought about that? It's like, yes, all of the things. We love DDO.
Oh, that's another big one. So Ravenloft was in the store. You could buy it. You can't buy all the packs, which means there's that little bottle of mist that teleports you to Ravenloft that you can never get ever again.
Yeah.
Would you guys think about itemizing the old expansion pack stuff? So being like, this was in the expansion pack, and then you just liquidated it down. Now you buy the expansion, and all the items that were in there are now you just hit them in the store. So I can buy my Scarecrow hireling or whatever. Which
what I've honestly been thinking about doing is bringing back, because the reason that they're not there right now is just we were trying to thin out the amount of stuff that was in the DDO market before we did the migration, because we were trying to wrangle like all these different ones. It just made it a lot more difficult for testing and a whole bunch of other problems. And then once we were sort of, okay, DDO market is working, we're sure that it's fine, there's no weirdness now, but then we could start reintroducing stuff back in. And so I was kind of thinking through, like, man, would it be cool to have like some different, like, interesting repackaged things? Like, what happens if I have like the teleport bundle? It's the different teleports from the expansions that aren't really available anymore, but it's all just teleports. If you just care about teleports, here's the teleport kit, right? Or like, what if there's like the mount kit? What if there's, hey, we're bringing back the middle edition again? It hasn't been around for a while. There's lots of different options there, and I think I want to try to do those things. I just can't promise exactly when it's going to happen.
Yeah, for sure.
There's a million different things to do, but that is one of the things I've been talking about. I always hate the idea of stuff that we had it available and then you can just like never, ever get it again. Because like, what if you didn't join your DDO time until like, maybe the 16th year is the first year that you started playing DDO, and you're like, you don't get to have the opportunity to get all that stuff, even though you really like it.
Yeah.
So,
well, when Ravenloft released, there was the frequently asked questions where people were like, where's the pre-order bonus? And it was like, there is no pre-order bonus because we don't want people to only have like a limited time thing, so you can buy this thing whenever you want.
Yep.
And now it's not in the store, and I'm like,
Yeah.
It
definitely. Yeah, no, it was literally just like, okay, we'll bring this back at some point later, and then later just hasn't been now. Because like we found the difference between like say Motu and Shadowfell. Like when we did Shadowfell, we did like the legendary upgrade. We could get like the pseudo dragon and stuff.
Yep.
And that worked really well compared to when we did Motu, where we had that limited time sort of, okay, if you don't buy in this window, you can never get the Black Panther ever again. And while I still honor that never ever again Black Panther, and the subsequent ones, it's been like, if you are coming in years later and you're walking around, you see somebody with like the cool pseudo dragon, and you're like, well, how do I get the pseudo dragon?
Yeah, exactly.
Right? Like, I would totally support the game and get the pseudo dragon, but it's poof, gone. And I don't like that. So I do want to have the ability for them to get that stuff again. And we're just thinking through like, hey, would it be cool to not just bring back the old editions, but also do sort of reconfigurations of them in different amounts and like see what people think.
Yeah, I've always been a big fan of like either like a recolor of something. So it'd be like, you have the Feywild thing, or so was it? We got the Displacer Beast pet or something, the cat, and that's the one from Feywild. But then like a year from now, there is the Displacer Beast with something. It's like Spotted Displacer Beast. You get it later. So you couldn't get the original one, but you get something that's close enough.
Yeah, we definitely like having situations where, like, when you see a certain color of one, you kind of know where it came from. So it's like, this color of the, Displacer Beast is like, that's definitely from, the collector's edition or from the Ultimate Fan. And then, but this color of it, well, I got that as like an end reward at the end of the chain. Or, this one came from Daily Dice. Or like, that there's different ways to get like the different colors. And so that way you're still able to get over, like, let's say that you don't so much care what color your pseudo dragon is, you just care the fact that you have a pseudo dragon, that there's a way to get you a pseudo dragon that works for you.
I know that previous hardcore leagues, we've had a lot of interesting rewards. There's been the Bloody Footprints, we've had the mounts, and there's been the different cloaks and other cosmetics we've gotten. And the cloaks all look great. Big fan. The top tier reward for the Reaper points has been a cosmetic pet, I think, every time, which is very cool because almost nobody has them because they're very, very rare to get.
Super rare, right?
Are you guys thinking about possibly changing up some of the paradigm of like either mounts or existing kind of rewards, or are you kind of good with the way the rewards are looking kind of right now, like, pet and cloaks?
I think we have room to investigate. Like, I don't think that we're really trying to lock ourselves into any particular pattern with it, right? This is what we've been doing, but at any time we could choose to reassess and be like, you know what would happen if we did X? Like, that's kind of the place we like to stay in, is we don't like to sort of box ourselves in and never have the option to do something different if there's like a more viable, like, we think players would be way more excited if they had fill in the blank of whatever that thing. Like, even with like the rules, right? Like, for the next season, we've talked about like, okay, up to this point, this is the goalposts that people have had. Do we want to make different goalposts? Like, would people like that more or less? Like, let's explore it. What do we think? So I think there's totally room for more experimentation there.
Yeah, I think that obviously, like, I'm a big fan of the rewards, but people just like getting different stuff. It's just cool when you have a different thing for doing something different. So oh, another question. This actually affects me. Accessibility is always something you have to think about when you're designing something for the online space. And Dungeons & Dragons Online, unfortunately, doesn't really have a lot of options for people that, like myself, happen to be colorblind. So I can't see all the colors. Now, DDO is not too bad for me because of the colors. Lord of the Rings is a million times worse because it's all literally gray ground everywhere and then red effects for all the bosses, and you just can't see anything. But DDO is not as bad. But still, is that a priority or something on the list for you guys right now of making better accessibility options for people?
Yeah, so we actually have staff members that do have color blindness, and so we do try to think about, particularly puzzles is really bad. Like, if you're going to do a puzzle, there's a tendency for people to want to make the puzzles be color-based. But it's like, you can't just be color-based. Like, you actually, even if you were to do like the sort of, yellow, red, blue combination, you still are better off having like something else to do the indication than just that. So that is on our minds. Like, if there are areas that are really particularly egregious, like, I would love to like hear more about them, because we're trying to be conscious of it, but it's tough, like, when you don't see it yourself. So you're kind of having to then lean on the people who do encounter it and try to go, okay, okay, now I see. Like, we had one change that we were looking at the other day where somebody was like, what if we just change the targeting? And it's like, okay, when we change the targeting, we have to be careful that the new solution we're trying to use isn't going to be worse for people than the one that we already had, right? But then we have to think through, okay, how do we test for this? How do we make sure that we think we're doing the best practice here, but is it? So those are two conversations we have pretty frequently. I know that the most common place that they come up is definitely in puzzle design inside the dungeons. In terms of other parts of the UI, if there's other parts that people are finding, like, very specifically, like, oh man, like the LFM system is like, it's like, definitely let us know so we can get them on the list.
Yeah, I know that's a whole thing, depending on whether it's UI. I mean, the UI, there's a lot of, like, you can make your own pack or download packs from other people now, which is cool. So it at least helps out a little bit with some of the color issues. But yeah, especially when it comes to puzzles. I still remember Too Hot to Handle released, and it was all about colored things. And one of the biggest complaints is, like, I can't see that. And so there were little numbers actually indicated on all of the puzzles to make it way easier. So, which is a good change.
Yeah, like some of the rune wheels got updated to have, like, different symbols a couple years ago.
Oh, really? I actually didn't know that.
Yeah, yeah. There was one where it used to just be like the colors, and then it eventually came in and it's got like, you'll see like kind of a diamond-y shape, and then
Yep.
like a plus shape and a couple of other different ones. It always reminds me of, do you ever play the board game like Ticket to Ride?
Yep.
Like Ticket to Ride was always really good at that. So if you looked at a track, it didn't matter what color it is, you know which one it is, because this one's a circle, this one's a plus, this one's a whatever, right? So those types of things are super important.
Another question that I think has just been coming up, these are things that happen, was asked in 2020, it's 2021, 2022 is now rolling around. A lot of people go to the store on Black Friday and they go to Best Buy and they buy monitors that basically take up the whole ceiling, or like the whole wall. And then when they're playing their game from their $7,000 gaming cockpit, they're looking around and then they can't see any of the numbers because the screen is all the UI elements are too small. How's DDO coming on the UI scaling on that front, or has it been progress been made since last year or so?
I do not have the latest updates on progress. I know this is something we've been talking about, particularly with the art group, with the UI folks, and we've been talking about like, okay, how can we tackle this? And I don't know where they landed on the R&D around that, because like I say, like you go to try to play it and it's like speak.
Yeah, exactly.
So like that's not a thing that's going to go away, right? Like people love huge monitors. Like even me, like from a huge monitor perspective, I usually have like 2 monitors going. So like so many people do that now. Like the screen real estate that happens is just so much more than it used to be. That there's that falls on the list of those things we can do to sort of uplift from how we've aged.
Yeah, I know that for me personally, actually one of the reasons why I've never upgraded my monitors, I'm like, I play DDO as a job, so I had a nice little monitor, and I never hear this problem doesn't exist for me. So
it's funny, I've gotten so used to a dual monitor that it never even occurred to me. It's like, wait a minute, I could just have one big monitor.
Yeah,
like,
you can have one big monitor and then spread everything out.
Like,
yeah, that's the play. That's the winning move. I've seen that. I did have another question. So because obviously you're going to be getting more involved with different aspects of the community, in what ways do you think people are people going to be hearing more from you? So like, are you going to be looking at like the Discord, or are you going to be more active on the forums? Will you be showing up sometimes with Cordovan on the weekly Wednesday?
Yes, and yes, that's the plan. The forum is the easiest one, to be honest, because since it's a little bit more asynchronous, because people are sort of posting, you're not like there like watching each other type, right?
Yeah.
I've always found the forums to be a really easy thing to be culling through while you're doing other work, right? Like you do a thing and you're waiting for it to load, you can be like, okay, what's here? So I've always found that one to be super easy. The Discord will be kind of a new way of engaging with players that I'm kind of excited about, because I've always had the theory from working in the community back in the day that people sort of settle into like their favorite part of the community. There's going to be people who like the forums, but maybe don't like Discord. People who like Twitter, but maybe don't like Facebook, or wherever it is, right? Everybody kind of has their home base that they like to be. And that also means that the social dynamic of how they like to engage is very different.
Yep.
And so compared to like years ago where the main place people wanted to go was the forums, right? Like that's where you were. And now there's like so many different places that I think it's going to be really exciting to kind of see I'll call it the personality of each of the different places, or even what the personality has become over time, like comparing the forum experience now to what it used to be, or comparing, live streaming now to back when we used to just be putting out videos, non-live stream format. I'm very excited about that kind of stuff, and I'm pretty comfortable in it, because like, when you were doing community management, you had to be in all those places. So
you're already doing all
it's
that.
It's like coming home.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm very lucky about that same thing, because I don't spend as much time on the forums, but I spend a lot of time here on Twitch, and I have this awesome community that I've cultivated around the game, and everyone's having a good time. And of course, obviously, if you guys are watching right now, if you aren't part of the community, definitely hit that follow button, so make sure you can watch. I stream basically every day, so keep that one there. Yeah. And then I know one of the big ones that a lot of people want to ask about, and this is a thing, is that there's all sorts of like people want to run and use third-party programs and stuff with DDO. It's like every other game that they're running. So like a tracker for tracking stats, or loot pickups or other things. And DDO is very like, it doesn't want to do that. It's unhappy. There's no like API or thing people want to rip into. Obviously, I know that probably not under your purview. How do you feel about that sort of thing in terms of like people using third-party software and or not using third-party software, but like making add-ons or things for the game?
I think it's like, I get why people do it, and then I also get why a game will be sort of, I don't want to say gated, that's not quite the right word, but what you always have to watch out for is when people are adding things that are slamming the services, right? Because that's not a thing people think about when they're doing it. What they're doing is just, I'm making this thing for myself and it'll be more helpful for me. And and you're sort of outside the bubble. And so then when you're touching the bubble, like if you're touching it this many times, it might not have been meant to do that.
Right.
So that's like always like the big risk card with the services. Like to me, what I really enjoy is when players have like the sort of standalone ones that aren't like actively doing things. It's more like a thing that you're doing kind of off to the side, and you're like, oh, this is nice. Like crafting planners and puzzle solvers.
Yeah, there's lots of good still DDO tools like that on different websites and stuff.
Yeah. Like I love puzzle solvers. Like, oh my gosh, like there are so many puzzles where I know how to solve the puzzle. I 100% know what the gimmick of the puzzle is, but I just don't have, I'm playing at the end of a long day and I'm just like, I just want to relax. I don't want to think through how to do this puzzle. Can I just pull up a solver and just, which pattern loaded today? Okay, boom, here we go.
Yep, that's either, same thing for me. It's either I got it here instantly or I'm on the solver. Those are the two answers. No solving.
And solvers are the kind of thing where I wouldn't want a game to just like hand the solver to me. To me, that feels like a very community-driven thing where you want it to come from other players. Like you don't necessarily want the game to just like force the answer at you.
Yeah.
Because DDO is like it's a thinking game, right? I mean, I know I say I want to relax at the end of the day, but it's a thinking game. Like you're thinking through the puzzles, you're thinking through your strategy in a way that's like you don't want the game to just like spoil it for you, right? Like I feel like somehow when I check solver that I still feel like I did it. That the game wasn't the one that was like, oh, sorry that you couldn't solve this. Here's a little booby prize because you couldn't figure this out. Instead it's like, no. I cleverly found a resource to help me get through this.
Yep, it's like the same problem of when you play a video game and you fail at it, so the game tells you it's making itself easier for you, and you're like, oh.
You're like, don't tell me that.
Yeah.
Don't tell me you were helping me.
This might be a good natural stopping point here, because we've gone through a lot of stuff, and I've gotten a lot of questions from chat, and this has been a lot of fun. So thank you so much for coming on the broadcast with me. This has been a great experience. It was nice to get to talk with you and hopefully give some people a good introduction to who you are and what you do and what you're going to do. I'm super stoked for that Unicorn Strahd Feywild pack thing that we talked about. That's going to be great. It's been really nice. Did you have any closing words for everybody that tuned in tonight to watch?
I just really appreciate everybody that came out. I know some people are staying up super late to see this, and I love you as much as you love DDO. So if you're here, we'll keep making the dungeons. Like I just am so I don't know, humbled, I guess, by that there's so many other people who love DDO as much as I love it,
Yeah.
And it's just such a great community, and it's great to be home.